Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto was summer in My Little Pony. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Nasha Rei-Kun and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. He idly wondered what he was to do with himself now. The pebble skipped its way down the beaten path. The fail-safe, his own loss of control, a repentant but determined father. The small stone found itself captured by force again as it skipped further down the long, vacant path. His eyes trailed after the plain rock. The sake of his whole village on the line, and he wondered sometimes if it was worth it. His eyes narrowed in on the stone. The black appendage moved backwards in preparation before sailing forward. All the pain, blood, tears, and sweat. All gone in one fit of rage. The limb was nearly upon the pebble. Was it worth it? The limb stopped just short of accomplishing its goal. It set itself back on the floor. His eyebrows relaxed into a softer stare. The leg rose slightly before kicking out at the stone once more, the pebble skipping farther down the vacant earth. A saved village, revived people, a changed heart. His lips curved at the edges as he looked down at the holes. The leg was riddled with a few near the end by the hoof. A curiosity. He ventured once more after the stone. There was a saying that he always heard but could never truly understand. One said by a man that was as close to him as Iruka-sensei. Most heroes don't get to stay around long enough to see themselves called one. 3 years of training, and that was one of the few things he hadn't come to learn about in his time away from his home. Or former home, in this case. Hiro-senin, I think I finally get it. He let out a small chuckle, even as he raised his hole-filled leg once more. The roughed-up form of his orange and black clothes, they told a tale, but his new appearance. That told of a sacrifice, depending on how well you knew him in person. Though he wondered if he was still considered a person by this point. He kicked at the stone, watching as it sailed farther out before bouncing its way into a puddle of water. He couldn't help but to pout as the rock hid from his sight. The reflection of the water a few feet away, hiding its depths. Aw. He sighed as he walked over to the puddle. His gaze catching sight of a creature he'd very well bet no one in the elemental nations had probably ever seen before. It's clearer than in the kunai, he muttered to himself as he took in the reflection. Sapphire blue, composite eyes stared back at him, not unlike those of a fly's. A long snout and strangely tattered ears were on display, along with the 2 small fangs at the sides of the protruding lip. At its head sat what looked like fins, of a golden yellow quality that seemed to mimic a familiar patch of hair. Or maybe it was all one thing. He wasn't a bug specialist. He wasn't Shino, though he wondered how the bug user would take to this gathering of characteristics. To finish off the appearance summary by looking at the small stubs of horns protruding on its forehead, parting the hair at their bases. Last, but not least, those horns were of a black coloration that matched the rest of the outer shell of this creature in the watery mirror. Looking over at his snout and flickering his ears as he turned his head side to side, he seriously wondered what the hell he was. I kind of look like a bug, he deduced, and it was far more likely that he was right. He'd definitely seen more than his fair share of bugs when he was a kid, and as he gained Sage Mode in Mount Mombakizan, he'd been more than surrounded by bugs. Especially the ones the toads ate and fed him. Etch. That's a memory I'm not too big on remembering again. Ugh. He shuddered as he tried to ignore the phantom taste of larva in his mouth. His head tilted as he looked up at the sky. He scratched his black, shell-covered noggin. Wait, didn't it rain? Where are the clouds? He wondered out loud, but he would receive no answer. No one was around. Now that thought about it, where was he exactly? I'm really wondering where I am right now. TCL. He'd been walking for some time now. He'd have tree jumped, but he was still feeling the exhaustion from his fight with Nagato. His tattered orange and black tracksuit revealed the slight amount of scrapes and bruises he held. He was almost sure the Kyuubi had something to do with this, but not like he could ask something that wasn't there anymore. The Kyuubi no Yoko, the Bijuu of 9 disaster swinging tales, the embodiment of darkness of his life. Gone. He idly wondered about this. His father had said that the fail-safe would take the Kyuubi away. A time-space technique that would rid the ninja world of the Kyuubi before it got out of hand. He never wanted this because he personally knew the Kyuubi's current Jinchuriki, but he always tried his best for the village. The blonde wasn't sure what to think about his father, honestly. If broken down, it was his fault all the things that happened to him in life did. He shook his head. He understood why he did it all. Naruto Uzumaki didn't lay the blame on others when they were trapped in unbeatable circumstances. He puffed out his chest in pride. His father was a great man. Besides, he was the Hokage and he also had to look out for the village. Humming to a stop, he lifted a hand to his chin. He idly wondered, would he have done the same as his father should he have been Hokage? It was a good distracting thought. He moved as he thought. He liked to think that he'd definitely think of the village first when it came to his own desires, but what if he had a family? Would he, in a time of need, push upon his son or daughter? He wasn't specific, the responsibility. He honestly didn't know. Holding a hand, he thinks it was a hand, to his stomach, he entertained the thought for all of a moment. He snorted in disgust. Never. He would never push this on anyone who was barely aware of the world. As proud of the man as he was, his father was also kind of an asshole. Make no mistake, Naruto appreciates it, the Kyuubi had gotten him out of a slew of situations where most wouldn't end up walking away. He patted his belly. Hear that furball, you're appreciated, he said out loud, to no avail. Not like anyone was even around in this place. Hello? His holy ears perked. Wait. His mind slowly caught up. Is some pony out there? That voice, he didn't recognize it. Holy shit, civilization. Other people. He quickly made himself known to whoever it was. Idly forgetting the fact that he had no idea of whether this person was with good intentions or not. At that moment, here was a boy who'd lost everything and was seeking some form of human or whatever contact with another sensible living being. Hey. Yo. Whoever this is, I'm over here. He shouted out into the forest before he heard some bushes shaking to his far left. The rustling got louder as whoever was coming followed his voice. The incoming person made him slightly nervous as he picked at his hair. He really hoped that this person wouldn't mind seeing a giant bug person. Kami above, he needed some good old-fashioned human. At that moment, the person broke through the foliage with a shout. Hey, I heard you. I didn't think there were any civilians out here. The person petered out as the two males, he was sure this guy was male at least, looked at one another. Naruto couldn't help but stare as what could only be a bipedal, walking, talking, horse person came out of the bush. Noticing the horn on his head, the blonde touched the tip of his own pair before getting a good look at this guy. He was about just as tall as he was, so around 5'7", maybe 5'8". With blue hair and a tail of a darker and lighter coloration, baby blue eyes and white fur that covered his body. On his person, Horseson, he was adorned in light-looking armor. It seemed generic in make, maybe. Naruto had never really seen armor like this. He didn't look like a samurai, but there was a sword at his waist. All in all, if he had to guess, this guy was maybe a soldier or something. They stared at one another, eyes locked on. They kind of just stood there for a moment, neither sure of what they should say or who should say something first. Rookie. Get your ass back here, we don't have all day. Private shining armor wearer from the bushes emerged another of these horse people. With gunmetal gray fur, speckled white hair, was it a mane or hair, and tail. He was wearing a far more embroidered version of what the younger soldier was wearing, the older appearing to be in maybe his late 20s early 30s. With other guy looking to be around his teens, maybe. Naruto wasn't sure how horses aged, so he went with his gut. The elder horse person seemed to stop and stare at him as the younger trainee, junior officer, whatever did. His interruption did get their brains working though, enough so that they both yelled and pointed at one another. What the hell Tartarus are you? Came a unison of yells before the two looked at one another strangely, with matching frowns. The gray horse person narrowed his eyes at Naruto specifically before resting his right hand on the hilt of his sword. Who are you? What are you? And finally, why are you in and sealed off zone meant for training the solar core? The questions were fired off with a low-sounding growl, each one punctuated by a tightening of a body part and a grip on his sword. Seeing the elder of the two pony people giving him a dark look, Naruto went out of his way to make sure no misunderstandings were had. Holding up his hands in a placating, non-violent gesture, he spoke. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I didn't come here knowing any of that. I just sort of ended up here. I was walking in the forest and I just kept walking until, something happened. His words said, he looked the gray horse person in the eyes and kept still. Morse code couldn't help but narrow his eyes some more. His golden yellow orbs focusing in on the pony before him in great scrutiny. He wasn't even sure if this thing was a pony, even if it looked like one. From the way he looked, he seemed to have either been in a fight by the state of his clothes or he was a bum. The black carapace on this guy's body made him seem like some kind of bug, but he didn't jump to conclusions. That was a rookie mistake, besides he noticed that this thing didn't tell him what he was or his name. That said, he did notice several things about the seemingly teen creature. 1. He seemed fairly calm for being in a situation such as this one. Most ponies would at least be working up a sweat at the hint of violence. Unless he was one of those violence junkie types, in which case, him being out here might have held a little credence. 2. He could see that the blonde was giving them both a curious look. Like he'd never seen a pony before. Recalling his outburst from earlier, that may very well be the case, though that lead him to wonder where this being came from if he'd never seen a pony. 3. The brat, because he was convinced he was a teen at best, and all of them were brats until proven otherwise, looked him straight in the eye with nary a bit of hesitance. Confidence. That's what it was, but confidence in what was the missing clue here. Whatever this kid's game was, Morse wasn't playing it. State your name and whatever you are. I will not ask again. He needed as much information as was possible. Naruto wasn't going to say he wasn't impressed, this old guy was no joke. A no-nonsense character who was strict and right to the book. He kind of reminded the ninja of Ibisu, yeah, Ibisu-sensei. Clearly, he wasn't taking his misdirection of the first 2 questions. That said, the blonde wasn't sure what he could tell the man, what were the male equivalent for horses. Besides his name. And even then, it didn't look like they recognized what he was, so the blonde wasn't sure if saying he didn't know was gonna fly. His silence was telling, as he saw the older man horse crease his eyebrows. I repeat, establish yourself before I have you detained for questioning. This wasn't going anywhere fast, and the blonde wasn't sure what he could do besides tell the guy what he did know and end up a suspected convict. You have till the count of he started, and the blonde just decided speaking was better than being considered a spy or something. Okay, hold up. Look, my name is Uzumaki Naruto, and I'm honestly not sure what I am or where I am. He just spoke truth, not like lying would get him anywhere when he didn't even know where was. Wait, so you don't know where you are? Wait, you don't what you are? Hey. The blonde looked to the younger soldier, as did the older one, who nodded his head. The junior officer's right. None of what you said makes sense, so either you're crazy or you're lying. The hold on the elder soldier's sword grew strict as the weapon slowly slid from its sheath. Now the blonde was on high alert as his composite eyes trained in on the double-sided sword, leaving its holder. Both the elder stallion and the blonde bug being were tense as the air of conflict began to grow. All it would take is a single move to spark action from the both of them. A single twitch and they launched themselves at each other. Naruto could feel the aches and pains from his battle with pain. He'd taken quite the beating, got chakra burned inside out by the Kyuubi, and had to keep fighting afterwards to ensure the peace of his home. He wasn't in good shape, so his movements were fairly down. Mind you, he was still fast enough that he was sure he could disarm the horseman, so they could talk this out. He really didn't need a warrant out on his head, in a place he still didn't know the name of. So with that mindset, he was prepared to make this as quick and painless, for both parties, as possible. So when a blue ephemeral wall came up between the two of them, he could be forgiven for running into it and he would blame it on the exhaustion. He grunted, as did the other guy, as they bounded off the wall. Both of them found themselves on the floor, rubbing their noggins before looking up at the construct of energy, at least Naruto thought it was. The gray guy, though, looked to his junior officer, and Naruto followed his gaze to see the horned horse's horn glowing as he held up 2 hands to the middle of the clearing. Junior officer? What's the meaning of this? Sounds like old, gray and grumpy wasn't so happy with this. Though the blonde himself wondered the same as he turned his head to the teen horse boy, who gave a sheepish look to his superior. Sorry sir. It's just, well, I may have a solution to this, if you're willing, sir. He saluted the gray stallion, who gave him the stink eye for a couple seconds. Moments later he sighed and rubbed the space between his eyes before looking at the unicorn with a narrow-eyed gaze that switched over to Naruto. You better have a damn good explanation when this is over, cadet. The unicorn flinched as he rubbed his arm. Yes, sir, he sighed out before trotting over to the mysterious being. Naruto at this point was now curious. He'd give the teen points for courage. Naruto challenged authority on a semi-daily basis, but he knew others didn't necessarily have that courage often. Respect points. Excuse me, yo, sorry about that. He was now apologizing, to which the blonde couldn't help but wave off. No harm, I can understand not trusting my story. It's as far-fetched as it sounds, but it is the truth, he explained. The horned teen gave him a nod of thanks before he spoke again. I think the best bet here would be to use a lie or seek spell, he mentioned to his superior, who gave him a frown still, but now looked contemplative. With this shining continued. My little sister used to tell me about some of the spells she found in the books at the Canterlot library. She showed it to me a couple of times, so I've got a pretty good idea of how it works. His words were working as he saw Morse rubbing his chin as he looked to the blonde. Continued junior officer. And that was good news. Turning back to Naruto, he gave him a basic rundown of what he was going to do. A spell? What's that? You mean like a jutsu, right? Spell sounds like all that magic stuff and we all know that's not real. And just like that both Unicorn and Earth Pony looked at the blonde like he just grew a second head. I'm sorry, but did you just say that magic isn't real? The gray stallion said, to which Naruto nodded. Well that's like stuff for little kids. Everyone knows magic ain't real. The junior officer and his superior looked to one another before the grown-up stallion rubbed his fingers between his eyes again. This was going to be a headache if he was telling the truth. Morse code had never hoped so badly for some pony to be a really good liar. What the Tartarus was a jutsu anyway? Too many questions, not enough answers. He hated those days. Shining turned back to Naruto with renewed curiosity before he began forming the spell. Naruto for his part watched as the horned horse guy's horn began to glow a pale purple. The glow flowed from the horn and gathered into an orb above the blonde's head. Said orb quickly grew a pupil before staying above him. Looking up at the eye, Naruto quirked an eyebrow before turning to Shining horn stayed glowing. He smiled in satisfaction before asking Naruto a question. So your name is Uzumaki? Yeah, though Uzumaki is my last name. Shining blinked before tilting his at that. So your name is Naruto? The blonde nodded. Yep. So why say your last name first? That's because I'm honestly not sure. I never really paid attention in class, but I'm sure they went over this. He tapped his chin as he tried to think about why that was. Shining, well curious, tilted his head upward. The eye hadn't changed colors, staying the same pale purple of his own aura. So Naruto Uzumaki was his name. Okay, let's try something else. Are you sure you don't believe in magic? He asked with a raised eyebrow. The blonde just shot him a weird look. Yeah, why would that change? The eye was still pale purple, but now he was curious even more so. And how do you think I did this? He gestured with one hand to the floating eyeball above the blonde's head, to which he just snorted. It's obviously a jutsu. Magic ain't real. Just like that, they knew he was telling the truth, but that only left them with one explanation for this. He was indeed telling the truth, which was kind of mind-blowing, considering he didn't know what magic was, or even his own race. You gotta be pretty good at doing jutsu though. There are few guys I know who can do them without hand signs. And just like that, he'd lost them again. TCL. Wait, so let me get this straight, magic is real. You're a unicorn? He's an earth pony. You guys are ponies. He kept that gaping mouth look for a while as they walked. It was almost too funny with how the blonde had freaked out earlier when he couldn't find any of this chakra stuff when he went into sage mode as he called it. They'd asked him about it and all he could give them was a garbled mess of something about toads, insect, and lots of oil. It was a road that lead to madness, that one, so they dropped it. So, Shining was it? What are you guys doing out here? The blonde asked, causing both officers to stop and stare for a moment before Morse code facepalmed and Shining let out a nervous laugh, to which Morse gave him a stern look. You'll be cleaning the latrine tonight, junior officer. And there went Shining's hope that things had blown over. Throwing a look Naruto's way, the unknowing changeling simply whistled innocently. They'd been traveling for a while now, and as they moved forward the blonde couldn't help but notice that the trees were thinning somewhat. That was one clue that they were transitioning to somewhere else. The next was when he started hearing shouts and the like synchronous chorus of yes sir, hup, 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 and the like invaded his hearing senses. Ahead he could see a break in the trees that once they passed revealed to him what could only be a training camp. Soldiers he'd assume, guys and gals in shirts and pants shorts, were currently running laps around a perimeter of a track. Others were in the center seemingly doing routine calls and exercising. Another section had horse people, no-weight ponies, running a set of obstacles. It brought him a sense of nostalgia. It reminded a lot of the academy. He could even see a couple of groups some distance away from them practicing hand-to-hand or fighting with their swords as others cheered them on. Seeing the blonde's expression, Shining was quick to give him the rundown. All the while, Morse code looked on as he saw several of his fellow officers spread throughout the area. He saw a certain group of ponies coming their way. A male Pegasus in the lead followed by 2 unicorns, 1 female and 1 male. Meeting them midway, Morse code separated from both Naruto and Shining, leaving the 2 teens to talk amongst themselves. So who are these guys? He whispered to his fellow teen, who glanced to the blonde out of the corner of his eye as they faced forward. Those are the other members of the Royal Guard. Captain Sailwind and his captain lieutenants. Lumen Glow and Bright Glow, they're twins, Shining explained, causing Naruto to nod his head. He took notice of the fact that both the twins sent a strange look his way. Morse code was done speaking with Sailwind when the duo brought his attention to the blonde non-equine. Seeing him look his way, Morse led them over. When they got close, he took notice of the curious gaze of the male twin, while the female was sending him that same no-nonsense vibe Morse did. Sail was quick to look him over for a moment before turning to Morse with a frown. So you have no idea what he is or where he came from. Morse, you understand that this sounds ridiculous. The more smooth-sounding voice of the Captain Pegasus brought Naruto's attention to him. Green eyes, curly yellow hair and blue fur. This was another thing he noticed about these ponies, they were every freaking color under the sun. Morse code sighed for the nth time that day before retelling of how things had progressed to where they were now. When he got to the part about the possible near fight, Sailwind and Lumenglow narrowed their eyes, with the female twin turning her slightly angered gaze his way. He rolled his eyes at her, she narrowed her eyes even further, and from there he knew. She was not going to be a fan of him anytime soon. If the look was anything, she was probably super suspicious as it was. And he was right. Not even moments later, the Earth Pony captain called over Shining while the twins made themselves passage into his orb of personal space. Twin sets of light brown fur and dark pink hair. The separating lens for them was that while Lumen had green eyes and her hair fell to her shoulders, Bright's eyes were lime green and his hair was short in a buzz cut. Bright Glow seemed to be curious of his looks as he rubbed a hand to his chin. He looked the blonde up and down before leaning back and looking skyward. Lumen on the other hand. "I'm going to make one thing straight here," she started, garnering his attention and a frown at the look of hostility she bore. Her hand was clenching as if to grasp something that wasn't there. "I don't trust you. No pony does, nor should they. That junior officer is lucky that he didn't end up dead because of an unknown variable such as you," she hissed at him, which caused him to glare back at her with little fear. Weakened as he was, the blonde felt that she was just being overly paranoid and if it came down to it, he could handle her. As he stood there though, he couldn't help but notice something in the air. He wasn't sure what it was, but it was seemingly sweet smelling and his tongue flicked across his lip as if to try and taste it. "Sister, cool it. Seriously, it's not like Captain Code wasn't there the whole time. If things got out of hand, he would have handled it," the brother said, causing her to look off to the side before turning his attention to Naruto himself. The ninja raised an eyebrow as the other Rosette gave a confident smile. "Look, well she is right that you're an unknown variable, I don't think that her sense of hostility should be so." He tried to find a good word for it, but Naruto supplied him one. "Obvious," he said, to which the sister glared at how young he sounded while the brother just laughed as he nodded. "Ha. See, even he could tell," he said to his sister, who gave Bright an annoyed look. "Shut up, Bright," she huffed before turning her gaze back to the blonde bug person. "Well, yeah, but seriously, we don't mean any harm," Lumen snorted, causing him to sweat. "I mean it, yeah, I got nothing. Just try not to get on her bad side, please." He sighed before Naruto blurted out. "She has a good side." That earned him a glare that could melt stone from the sister and a laugh from the brother. By that point the captains had finished talking with Shining and sent off the junior officer to a large building in the distance. The duo of Earth Pony and Pegasus walked over. "Morse tells me that you have no idea what you are. Quite frankly, I find all that a bunch of bull hockey, but in lieu of the fact that one of our officers had a liar scrying spell used on you and it turned out positive, I'm willing to give you the benefit of the doubt," he said, forest green eyes flicking to the blonde sapphire blues. "Right, so, what now?" That was the question, wasn't it? When he really thought of it, what was he supposed to do? He had no identification here besides his name. He didn't know what he was, so he wasn't sure if pony jobs were the fit for whatever a bug person like him did. His tongue flicked across his lips again, involuntarily due to his new dilemma, but also to seemingly catch that taste again. Weird. He had no idea where to go from here. Crap. That's a really good question. Do you have any bits to your name? He tilted his head at him and the stallion could only shake his head. "Bits?" he questioned. "Yeah, bits. Little gold coins. You know, money." This caused the blonde to search his pockets before pulling out a few gold coins, just that they weren't bits. "You mean rim?" he inquired, causing the captains and lieutenants to take a look at the currency he showed them. They were gold-colored like bits, but they were in different shapes. More oval-like, and they had little ridges on each side. Picking one up, Sailwind gave it one more look over before shaking his head, causing the blonde to curse. "Damn it, Dad. Couldn't you have at least had the money change with me?" His mind screamed at his father as the quintet of 4 ponies and a bug person stood around. Growl. They all looked around for a moment before their eyes landed on a sheepishly laughing blonde who only groaned as his stomach went off again. Bride had a laugh as Morse and Sail let out small smiles. Lumen was unmoved and just gave him a raised eyebrow. "Really?" she said in a mocking sort of tone. He just whined. "It's been so long since I've had food, TT. Well, it's about to be dinner time actually." Sail reached into his right pocket and pulled out a bronze pocket watch. He checked the time and nodded his head before whistling over to a nearby Pegasus. The blonde snapped his head skyward and saw indeed that the sky had turned an orange hue. The sun was currently lower in the sky than he remembered. Said pony nodded before he gave out calls to get to the mess hall. Simultaneous calls were heard from captains in different sections of the camp, followed by the cheers from the junior officers. They all watched as the groups began to converge in on the large building in the distance where Shining had gone earlier. though many a time, he saw several ponies taking a look at him. Some cringed, some seemed curious, some squinted their eyes and others didn't bother with any special attention. So maybe this won't be that bad. TCL. Okay, so things could be better. So those looks from earlier were kind of indicative of what he'd be dealing with. The curious ones were definitely the best of them, with apathetic second best. Mind you, he'd gone to sit by himself, if only so he could eat in levity. Aware from the curious ones, who thought he might unhinge his jaw or something to eat his sandwich. The indifferent ones were okay to be around, but they kind of came off as standoffish, or in worse cases, they were indifferent because they could be completely and totally unnervingly quiet among themselves. Sitting near a group of indifferent ones was like being near a pack of yakuza, no ifs, ands, or buts, he couldn't eat near people like that. He took a bite of the strange meat sandwich and couldn't help but twitch as he heard an inaudible gasp somewhere in his right vicinity. He let out a sigh, allowing his shark teeth to the world, getting another small gasp. He grit his teeth and obviously went without saying what happened. Turns out, some ponies really didn't like bugs. They shied away from him at every possible moment. If he even looked in some of their directions, they'd pull their heads down or look away. It was unnerving in a different way. It almost reminded him of what it was like back when he was a kid and trying to make friends at the park. Almost. Too bad, there was also a fourth group that seemed to want to fill that niche in his life again. All too eagerly. He didn't even need to do much for this group. They always had their eyes on him, even more so than the curious ones. Always watching, always seeming to wait for him to mess up. The gazes were one thing, but the glares were another. "Tommy, take a picture, why don't you?" he muttered as he could feel the glares of someone burning through the back of his skull. In that moment, once he had a good idea of the direction, he snapped his head to the east, catching the gaze of Lumen and a small well of her friends, though he wondered if she could make those. She narrowed her eyes at him before he rolled his eyes once more and turned back to his lunch, missing the look of anger that she sent his way. Her little crew of both genders seemed to be of the various groups, but at least a third of them shared her opinion. Ignoring them, he was about to get back to his food before he found a tray now resting across from him, held by white fur-covered hands. Looking up, he caught sight of shining armor as he smiled down at him, causing the blonde to blink. "Is seat taken?" he asked, though it was really rhetorical or polite at this point, but the blonde shook his head and gave a small smile. "Nah, the only pony who was sitting there was some guy called Nothing. Real strong, silent type that one, but he's always willing to give up a seat." He joked, to which Shining grinned, both of them digging into their food, his a weird meat sandwich and the unicorn's a sandwich made of a dandelion. He stared for a moment before looking at his sandwich, then shrugging. They each their own, ponies. When he bit into his sandwich once more, he couldn't help but think it tasted weird once more. Like seriously, it tasted kind of watery. The taste was okay. Sort of, but you could tell the difference if you had real beef before. Seeing his expression, Shining spoke up. "What's up?" he asked before taking a bite of his own sandwich. Naruto gave him a conflicted expression. "Is there something wrong with the meat here?" The unicorn gave him a confused frown before had an aha expression. "You've probably had real meat before, right?" This left the blonde confused. "Real meat?" he parroted with fingers for air quotes for emphasis. Shining nodded. "Yeah, what you're eating is a meat substitute. It's usually reserved for Griffin soldiers when we have cross-military meets. Well, there are some Pegasi who prefer meat, but having real meat is kind of looked down upon in Equestria," he said in a whisper, causing the blonde to blink several more times before he took another bite of his sandwich. "He's had far worse. Still beat out bugs though. By a long shot." It was as they were having this little exchange that Naruto saw something on the unicorn's right hand. "Hey Shining, what's with the tattoo?" he inquired as he finally had some decent conversation. He'd been noticing everyone had this weird tattoo-like thing on their hands. If they were male it was on the right, while female had it on the left. The unicorn officer simple grinned in pride. This is my cutie mark," he said, showing the blonde the marking, rolling up his right shoulder sleeve of his short-sleeved shirt to reveal an even bigger version of the mark on his deltoid. Naruto looked confused. "Cutie mark?" It sounded so girly. Like seriously, who named this thing a little girl? "Yeah, I'm going to assume that you've never seen one before." The blonde shook his head in the negative, causing the multi-blue maned pony to mumble. "Then you've definitely never been in Equestria before." The blonde just shrugged as Shining went on to explain. Apparently cutie marks were tattoos that appeared on the arms and butts, flanks, of ponies when they found out their special talent. Shining armors was apparently shield spells, not jutsu. It was in the midst of this conversation that the two were joined by a certain male twin of Lumen's, which caused the mare to glare over in Naruto's direction once more. The blonde could only feel the chills going down his neck as her glare intensified. His tongue flicked outward involuntarily as that sweet smell was back again. "Hey guys, how's it going?" His question was met by an enthused greeting by Shining. "Pretty good, sir. Naruto's just getting used to the idea of fake meat. That and I was explaining these." He finished his sentence by pointing to his exposed shoulder. Bright simply grinned before turning blonde with that expression. "Yeah, I was wondering, I don't see a cutie mark on you, so you're not a pony. Though maybe you're a late bloomer." He eyed the blonde's shoulder with interest. Enough so that he began to feel uncomfortable, but there wasn't much for him to do about it. Now that he thought about it. "Are there some showers around here? And maybe somewhere where I can patch up my clothes?" They looked at him, thinking for a moment before Bright snapped his fingers. "I can patch those up for ya. I'm used to sewing my sister's clothes, so that shouldn't be a problem," he said proudly before giving the blonde a look over. "Don't you want to get out of those things though? I mean, I can lend you some clothes, I've got spares in my bunk." The blonde frowned and took a really good look at his clothes but shook his head in the negative. "These clothes are really dear to me. If I had to compare it, they're like a memento of my late teacher." They frowned solemnly, catching their expressions. He did his best to relieve them. "It's no problem, I mean it. It's not like you knew, besides I came to terms with it not too long ago." Even if he was trying to get them to relax, Bright flinched while Shining looked uncomfortable, more so now than before. Naruto sighed before he tried to steer the conversation into another direction. "So, you can sew?" he asked, to which Bright Glow gave a nervous smile, causing the blonde to frown. "Well, yeah, I mean. Ever since me and sis were on our own, someone had to take up all the chores and well, let's just say dad wasn't very close by to really do anything." He scratched the back of his head before Naruto just nodded his head. He wasn't planning on delving into the pasts of his acquaintances. He'd like to call these guys his friends, but he wasn't even sure if he was gonna stick around to make those kinds of bonds. Turning to Shining, he hoped for a less solemn backstory at this table of males. "What about you, Shining? You got any hobbies?" This caused the unicorn to brighten slightly before his cheeks went slightly red as he scratched the back of his head. I mean. Nah, I don't have any weird hobbies. Me and my little sister couldn't cook to save our lives. I bet Spike is the one that cooks for her. Nope, no hobbies, just plain old Shining." "Hehehe, oh no," he said nervously before seeing the smirk on Bright's face. "Hey Naruto, did you know that Shining over here is an avid collector of comic books?" The blonde didn't know what they were and gave him a weird look. "Comic books?" They looked at him like he had just said blasphemy. TCL. Naruto could only stare up at the ceiling as he lay in the improvised floor bedding he'd been given. He was currently situated in a shed near the other barracks. He'd basically done his best to move things around so he could relax on the floor, and Shining had been pretty cool with helping move things around so he could place the blankets they gave him down on the ground. He stared in the dark of night as moonlight shone through in the small own window in the shed. He sighed before turning on his side. What should I do now? That was the biggest problem he had at the moment. To put things into perspective. He was alone and stuck in some world he knew nothing about. He had no real currency to his name, though Morse and Bright suggested that he could sell his coins to get some bits. He changed races somehow, but it's not like he knew how ponies would react to a human anyway, so that wasn't that serious. What did he have to do here? That was the worst one. He was a ninja, it's what he wanted to be all his life. Pass academy, become genin, beat Sasuke's sissy looking mug off his face and bring him home, and become Hokage. None of that beyond become genin was gonna happen. Though that little bit about being a genin did get him to snort. He'd done things and seen things most genin would never experience in their careers. Not like it mattered now though. Did they have ninjas here? He thought as he turned on his side again, doing his best to make himself comfortable. What could he do? He entertained the thought of maybe joining these guys on their way through the end of the training camp. He mentally went over his body and could nod in satisfaction as he could feel the sores and pains had lessened considerably after he'd gotten some food. He was at maybe 60%, which was more than enough from what he'd seen of the junior officers here. He remembered Shining saying that the camp would be coming to an end in the coming days. They'd be going on a miles-long march through the forest and circling around on a trail through some mountains to a place called Canterlot. He'd been noticing that there were a lot of horse puns. Hopefully, nothing happened so I can just think about this some more were his last thoughts before he closed his eyes and went to sleep. Morse code sat with Sailwind and the other higher-ranking officers. His eyes trailed over to the commanding officers and fell on the two captain lieutenants of Sails. "So, what do you think of him?" Some pony spoke up and the rest followed with some form of acknowledgement of the question. Bright Glow seemed to scratch the top of his head, minding his horn, before looking to his thin-lipped sister. She was looking none too pleased with him earlier and he was sure she was still slightly miffed with him. Permission to speak, sirs, Lumen spoke first, and he wasn't surprised to see the look on her face. She didn't like Naruto in the least and would probably make that perfectly clear in this meeting. Permission granted, Lieutenant. And here came the exposition as she stepped forward from him. Thank you, sir. I feel like I share the right opinion that none of that blonde's words should be trusted, she started, which caused Bright to frown. Morse and Sale looked to one another before turning back to her with raised eyebrows. Continue, Sale said. I don't like the circumstances surrounding the appearance of the thing in the forest near the training camp. Especially when we're so close to the end of the camp where we will be returning to Canterlot. His story is beyond ridiculous, even with the testimony of Junior Officer Shining. No offense, Captain Morse Code, but I just don't believe that a spell casted by a junior should be an end-all, be-all to a decision such as this. Her P said, she stepped back into line with her brother. The Congress of Officers spoke amongst themselves as they mulled over this information. What Lumen had said was true. A random passerby coming out of nowhere that had no knowledge of the very country they were in. On top of that, there was also the fact the blonde seemed to be lacking in some of the most basic knowledge of their land to begin with. To top it all though, was that he didn't even have an idea of his race. All those things by themselves were hard to believe, but topped on top of one another. It was reality of the situation that Naruto shouldn't really be anywhere near Equestria. Morse Code couldn't help but chew on his lip as he recalled when the blonde and he were to come to blows hours ago. The blonde was unknowing of where he was, but he was also a fighter. He'd even seemed like he'd been in a fight to begin with. Sailwind was of the mind that the blonde was to be watched, but he wasn't truly behind the idea. Naruto seemed to be fairly clueless for the most part, but that could all be an act. Lieutenant Lumen, you are aware of the fact that Shining's spell knowledge does come from his sister, correct? Young as she is, she does attend Celestia's school for gifted unicorns. Lumen nodded to this and slightly chewed her lip. Correct, sir, but Shining does not. He could very well be more inefficient with the spell than his sister, and it could have failed at points. Not a truly solid possibility, but it was true that Shining was a specialist in shield spells, not general ones. What do we do with him though? Unknown as he may be, we can't just release him into the forest. That came from somewhere in the room. Bright searched for who it could have come from, but came up with nothing. That said, this also sparked some form of response from those gathered. Do we just keep an eye on him? Should we assign him to a troop of our best and have them deal with it? We could just detain him here and leave on ahead. We'll send some pony back to get him once we're all situated in Canterlot. Should we cuff him? We've got a few magic cancelling bracelets for when the trainees get rowdy, don't we? And multiple other suggestions of such a nature were thrown around. Bright couldn't help but frown as he listened to it all. Looking to his sister, he saw no sort of emotion on her face, but she caught his eyes and they narrowed. This is for the best, hers said. None of this is right. His brow scrunched slightly. It doesn't have to be. Hers were relaxed as they remained impassive. So we'll just basically imprison some pony based on a hunch. His expression tightened more so, as did hers. If it'll keep you safe, then yes. Morse Code closed his eyes and heard it all before turning his head towards Bright Glow. Lieutenant Bright, his words cut off the siblings' mental conversation before Bright turned and saluted the Captain Earth pony. This caught the attention of the room as they all centered their eyes on the unicorn lieutenant, who sweated slightly. Sir? We spoke earlier about something of importance, do you mind revealing what you found out? This caught the room's attention as Bright reached into his pocket before retrieving a set of spheres. Dark purple and perfectly round, they were unassuming in nature. They even bounced, so most would assume that they were used for more mundane recreational activities. To those that knew what they were though. Are those? Someone's question rang out before Morse nodded as Bright's hand left the orbs, but they didn't drop from the air. Light-bending alibi ball, name pending, Sale said as Morse nodded before they turned back to the tan unicorn. At 18:20 hours, Lieutenant Bright went and joined the table of the Naruto and Junior Officer Shining Armor. I had him carry the equipment so we could conduct a test without the blonde's knowledge of it. This caught most of the room by surprise, sans Bright and Sale. Lumen looked to her brother, who scratched his short rosette hair. Yeah, I went about doing my own kind of investigating. I had one of our own lice scrying spells on hand and had it running the whole time, he said, causing some pony to ask. So what did you find? Bright gave a thoughtful expression for a moment before smiling. He seemed sincere enough. He was open enough that he was forthcoming with a lot of answers. He seems kind of dim, but not in a bad way. If I had to say, he's slightly socially awkward or more informal than anything. The attention in the mess hall wasn't really helping things, he stated as Lumen turned away from him, though other officers were curious. Attention? This question had the male twin frowning. Yes, his mannerisms, his looks and even what he eats. For the most part, I would say that me and Junior Officer Shining Armor were the only two he actually spoke to. And that's not even from the lack of trying. This caused the officers to murmur amongst themselves. Morse nodded his head as Sale brought his questions to the forefront of the meeting. Did you happen upon anything telling at least? You and him seemed to be cordial enough, he asked with his hands held together behind his back. Bright seemed conflicted. Some things, yes. His favorite food was something called ramen, he's had real meat before but can digest various food groups. He seemed to be lacking in some basic things, but for the most part the only thing I can truly say is that he's lost some pony recently. His teacher apparently recently passed. When I mentioned throwing away his current garments he asked to instead of them fixed, or at least in a stable state, he finally said, after some mulling over, though the frown he had on his face said he wasn't too fond of sharing that last bit. Bright honestly didn't think that the blonde was bad. He honestly seemed like he was lost. Like he didn't know what to do. It made Bright feel bad. I'd also like to bring to attention something, Morse code spoke up before retrieving a gold coin from his pocket. It wasn't a bit, that was for sure. What's that? This, ladies and gentlemen's, is a currency that the blonde had on him when we asked if he was without money. He held it up and all in attendance, minus those who've already seen it. He called this rim and he's unfamiliar with the concept of what a bit is. This sparked a question from the group. Did you take this while he wasn't looking? Morse actually chuckled. As a matter of fact, I didn't. He let me have it after I asked for it. He honestly has no idea where he is and I suggested that he should try and get this turned into some of our currency. This caused the rest to murmur as Bright sighed in relief and Lumen frowned. All those gathered here, I believe that what Morse is trying to say is that we might actually be dealing with a unique case here. From there things progressed. TCL. Morning after. Naruto only looked around as he saw every one of the ponies packing something. He felt kind of uncomfortable as he stood there, waiting for someone to speak to, or more like finding Shining or Bright. I see you're up and early today. I'm surprised, I imagined you'd be sleeping more. Coming behind the blonde was Sailwind, whose own blonde hair moved in the breeze as Naruto's own. The ninja hadn't flinched at all when the officer came up behind him, but did turn to him. He sheepishly scratched the back of his head. Yeah, well, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. Both here and in general. This caused Sail to nod his head as he thought back to the discussion from last night. He really has no idea what to do. They both just kind of stood there for a moment before the blonde kind of just stared at him expectantly, causing him to raise an eyebrow. Yes? He inquired as the blonde just grinned nervously before shrugging. Isn't there something you want to ask me? Like to do something, or better yet to know something? Consider his curiosity piqued, Sail wasn't expecting the blonde to have caught onto this, but when he considered the way most of the officers were treating him. You're right, I do want to ask you something. You understand that we don't fully trust you, the blonde Genin nodded his head in the affirmative. To be fair, we were thinking of just letting you go. You have no reason to be with us and we have no real reason to keep you here. We'd give you a small set of rations and some money and send you off. This caught the blonde off guard as he looked at the captain before he looked to the side conflicted. You sure that'd be a good idea? I can't imagine that this was just something you just decided to do to be nice. Besides, I'm not even sure where to go from here. Sailwind simply nodded as they looked over at the moving officers. The last sage of Mount Myabakizen spotted Shining and waved at him as he saw the unicorn team moving a set of sleeping bags. The white unicorn tried to wave back but only just found himself overwhelmed by his luggage and was now in a pile of the sleeping articles, causing those around him to laugh, Naruto included, from where he was. Sail simply watched as the blonde did this and closed his eyes in contemplation before opening them again. His mind was made up. We're going to be traveling for a few days before we make our return trip to Canterlot, he stated, to which the younger blonde nodded his head. Yeah, Shining and Bright told me about how close this thing actually was to being finished, he injected, while Sail nodded once more. You have no direction, no way home and no idea of where you truly are. He watched as the blonde listened and noticed that dip in emotion when he said that the blonde had no way home, which matched with what they knew. The blonde was truly stranded. We decided that maybe keeping an eye on you until we get back to Canterlot would be a better option, he said straight-faced, all the while Naruto came to the slow revelation of what he was saying before he coughed into his fist. Right. I understand, completely. I'll try not to cause any trouble. Sail had to smirk at that. Good, so while we keep an eye on you, why don't you help Junior Officer Armor with his duties? He said offhand, only to find himself talking to air as the blonde was already on his way to Shining's side and pulling bags. TCL. The following days had been slightly interesting, if the only because he was seeing the side of Bright he wasn't expecting. Watching the unicorn that was currently tossing and turning a pan of rice as he added eggs and vegetables to it. The lieutenant hummed as he carefully added a couple more turns before sharing out the rice to the next available trainee. Naruto and Shining were one of the few who'd gotten their food first, and by the end of it all, they sat nearby Bright as he was on cooking duty. Eating some of his fried rice, the blonde could appreciate how much of a mean cook Bright actually was. The Rosette had some serious kitchen skills, as he and Shining could attest to. He tugged the outfit he now wore. A long-sleeved thin white shirt and dark blue sweatpants. Bright was currently patching up his tracksuit, but the blonde was fine with waiting. "See, I told you he was one heck of a cook," Shining bragged as he nearly finished his own plate. Naruto merely smirked. "I'll give you that, he's a damn good cook," the bug man said, to which Shining nodded his head enthusiastically. They continued to eat before being joined by a certain set of twin lieutenants. Lumen was as pleasant as ever, if the sneer she sent his way was ever telling. Bright merely grinned at them as the duo of brother and sister sat down. Strangely enough, Lumen made sure that the two of them sat across from him and Shining. He'd sighed, but he'd been getting used to the cold treatment from her and a few select others. Better than anything he guessed. At least they weren't going out of their way to antagonize him. "So I hear you guys were enjoying a master chef's cooking over here. I figured I'd come over and see what all the noise was about." The other males grinned at him before Naruto spoke. "Yeah, real masterpiece. The rice and vegetables come so finely together, I can taste angels in my mouth." Shining eagerly nodded his head in conjunction. Bright was quick to lap up the praise as Lumen sat at his side, but if the blonde was seeing right, she was smiling slightly as she ate her meal. Until she caught him staring and frowned at him, causing him to whistle to the side. "So how much longer do you think it will be until we get home?" Hearing Shining's question, the blonde turned his attention back to the two males, Lumen mirroring his action. Bright thought about it as he took a bite of his rice. He was about to open his mouth, but. "Ahem, I hope I don't need to remind you to not talk when your mouth is full." Hearing his sister caused him to freeze in place before he swallowed audibly, causing the two younger males to snicker. Right. Like I was about to say, we're maybe a good 2 or 3 days away from Canterlot. Most of the next few days will be spent traversing through the mountainous region though. Not only the terrain, but there are some sleeping Scripolians on the path through the mountains," he said, causing Shining to gasp, while Naruto looked confused. "Scripolians? The heck is that?" he asked as he looked for an answer from both the males, but it came as a surprise that it was Lumen who answered him. "Scripolians, scorpion chameleon family. Shape of a scorpion in form, sizes ranging from pony size to maybe a story or two. Poison is lethal and must be vaccinated almost immediately upon being administered within 20 mins of injection. Special skills. Invisibility," she shot off, textbook-style information. The blonde, male Rosette and brunette all just stared at her before Bright just laughed. "Yep, that's sis for you. Always the textbook, but that's why we love her," he said with a laugh as he pulled her into a one-armed hug. The blonde was about to laugh but hiccuped as he smelled that sweet scent again and quickly covered his mouth. Watching Lumen get flustered was pretty alright though. TCL. He looked up at the mountain as the group marched on. They'd come across the mountainous path some time ago. Maybe half a day's travel in, and the blonde couldn't help but feel slightly creeped out. The mountain was pretty large and apparently there was a city at the other side of it. That said, they were going to go around the side and travel up the large uplift of rocky terrain. He didn't know why, but he felt an ominous vibe coming from the mountain. He would have stood there a little longer, but he felt someone pat him on the back. "Ready for this?" he could hear from his left as Bright glowed past him. The blonde was currently carrying a few of the bags, as was everyone else. That said, the blonde was almost 100% sure that he got left with more bags than most anyone else. That or the heaviest, if he was seeing everyone in front of him right. He could see out of the corner of his eye, Morse code and another captain he didn't recognize speaking to one another. Shining was somewhere ahead of him, speaking with a couple of the others. He found it weird just how ostracized he felt right now. The lone bug man thing on an island situation. Looking up once more as they moved, the blonde couldn't help but notice how strange this mountain looked. While there was greenery here and there, the rock sections seemed to be cleanly separated. It was like a literal perfect trail. Then again, this apparently wasn't the first ever time that an army assortment had walked these pathways. He looked up and far as he saw a ledge on the mountain that they'd be passing over probably somewhere down the line. "Something the matter, Uzumaki?" There was sail wind bringing up the rear with him. The blonde turned and acknowledged the elder one as he came out of his thoughts. "Just got some really bad feelings about the place up ahead," the genin stated, to which Sail frowned as he too turned his head to the destination ahead. He couldn't help but understand why his fellow younger blonde might be feeling this way. The ledge in the distance looked remarkably unstable. It had given him those same feelings back when he'd first done these training marches. He reassured the teen bug guy that things just seemed ominous. For the most part that they'd done this before, and as such nothing would happen that would interrupt their way home. Leaving the blonde to his thoughts, Sale walked on ahead. Naruto once more thought about the idea of home and couldn't really shake his funk. Besides the bad feeling from that archway, the idea of what he was going to do still eluded him. While he was thinking on this, he didn't see the last person who began to pass him. Looking up as he caught sight of medium-length hair that went down to her chin, Naruto called out to the pony in question. "Hey Lumen." He must have shocked her because she froze mid-step as if something impossible had happened. He shrugged it off, not important. "Uzumaki." She slowly turned and gave him a confused raise of an eyebrow, as if he was some sort of weird phenomenon or something, which had him rightfully miffed. He pouted. "Hey wait. Why are you saying it like that? That's kind of rude, don't you know?" He felt the indignity setting in, but her expression turned from confused frown to impassive indifference again. "Why I do the things I do is my business and mine alone. Now speak, or this conversation is going to be a lot shorter than you're expecting," is what she said, but internally she wanted to know why he called out to her, curious she was. He rolled his eyes at her once more before getting straight to it. "You were telling us about those Scripolian things, and that's got me wondering, how do you defeat one?" His inquiry must have shocked because her expression changed from one of impassiveness to shock and then to a confused frown. "And why, pray tell, do you want to know that?" He gave her a familiar-looking expression. "Why I do the things I do is my business and mine alone." She wasn't amused. "I can see this conversation was short. Thanks for wasting my time, Yuzu." "Fine. Fine, geez. Take a joke, will you?" He gave an exasperated look, to which she returned one with an annoyed frown. Seeing her expression, he grumbled before being straightforward. "I don't think things are going to go well once we reach the mountain, so I want to be prepared for anything that might go wrong." She scrunched up her nose at him and turned away, but she kept a pace where she wasn't outpacing him. Scripolians aren't known to be very distinctly hard to subjugate. The relatively small ones of their size range should be turned over on their sides or backs. They can be stabbed in the soft underbelly for a quick kill. No matter the size, all of them carry lethal venom in their tails, and such the stinger should be avoided as much as possible. She sighed it off as they walked, though he found something interesting about what she said. "Okay, good to know, but what about the bigger ones?" She didn't even stop when she answered him. "You don't fight the big ones. Anything that goes beyond the size of a single house is to be ignored hopefully and retreated from in the worst case," she stated with finality, causing the blonde to frown. "Is 2 stories the biggest these things can get?" he asked, but she didn't answer right away. "Official records state them at maxing out at 2 stories. And unofficially?" he finally asked. She didn't answer. "TCL." He looked up at the moon and star-filled sky in contemplation. He idly thought about his friends back home. What were they doing? Were they mourning him? Were they able to rebuild the village? He simply kept looking up, he wouldn't be bothered by anyone here. He'd taken a few meters away from the camp setup on the mountain trail and as such decided some me time was necessary. "Naruto. I knew I saw you coming out here." The voice of shining armor broke through the silence of his immediate area. The blonde couldn't help but sigh. He did smile though. Shining was the closest thing to a friend that he had in this place. "Shining, what's up?" he asked as the unicorn settled in next to him. Standing side by side, they simply watched the stars, time stretching between them. "So what's on your mind? You kind of just wandered off after talking to Captain Wind." He tilted his head in curiosity and the blonde let out a sigh as that was brought back to the forefront of his mind. "I'm just not sure what I'm supposed to do at this point, Shining." The unicorn hummed for a moment. "What do you mean?" The blonde sent him a conflicted smile before he let out a breath. "When I told you guys about me being here with no clue, I was telling you the truth. That said, I didn't tell you the whole story behind it. To give you an idea, I've been training nearly my whole life to be a warrior, plain and simple. It's always been my dream since I was 12. 4 years later, and I'm in a fight to save the village I lived in," he explained, but Shining frowned. "But something happened and now you're here." The bug teen nodded. "Right. I did something that came with repercussions, and now I ended up here." Looking like this, he waved an arm over his form. Shining thought about what he said for a moment before his eyes went wide. "Wait, are you telling me?" Naruto nodded. "I never looked like this where I'm from. I used to be what was called a human, as a matter of fact. Let me show you." "What are you about to do?" "Show you a jutsu." "Watch Hinge." No, he started, but something unexpected happened. He envisioned his normal self like he would in a normal henge for any other reason, but before he could actually start churning the chakra for the technique, his body lit up in orange, energy like fire, and the next moment he looked like himself. His human self. Shining looked on in wonder as he saw this human form of his blonde semi-sorta companion. The blonde himself seemed in wonder as well as he scrutinized the features he now bore, or bore again in his case. Whoa, dude, this is what a human looks like. Kind of remind me of monkeys, except you're less hairy and no tails. He gestured to the blonde's features before ending by wagging his own extra appendage. Though he started to worry when the blonde former bug guy looked at him with a frown. Something's not right. I didn't do the jutsu. I just thought about how I looked and boom, here I am. I've never been able to do that before and I shouldn't have been able to without making hand signs. Something's not right about this. He gave Shining a look of annoyed confusion before the unicorn asked him a question. So you've never been able to do this before? He asked, to which the human nodded. Shining reciprocated the gesture before asking some more. So this is new to you? Another nod. You shouldn't have been able to do this without these hand signs thing. Not only that, but you know this isn't right. Another set of nods, which had Shining looking at Naruto, who blinked. Maybe it has something to do with what you changed into when you came here. Shining would never been as smart as his sister, but he was still intelligent. As Twilight liked quoting from that textbook of hers. There's a cause and effect for everything. Naruto took the words in for a moment before running them into his head. He let it move for a bit before he nodded to Shining. Let me try something. The human version of Naruto closed his eyes before he was enveloped by another flash of orange energy and in his place stood Shining armor. Shining simply stood slack-jawed as his friend changed over and over again. First Shining. Bright glow. Morse code. Sail wind. Lumen glow. Then he changed into what Shining could only assume was more humans. A pink-haired girl. A man with hair that veered to the left with a mask over the bottom of his face. A woman with huge, assets. Some of the largest he'd ever seen. A girl with long violet hair in a large coat. Finally a teen with hair that short up near the back like a duck's tail with two bangs down the sides. His eyes were red with commas in them. Then the blonde was back to his bug guy form, frowning. So this really is the new me, Naruto said with a tone of finality before turning to look at a nervous junior officer. He smiled at his unicorn friend. Look, we learned something new, but that's not what's important. What is that basically I've got nothing to live for at this point. Shining frowned and the blonde held up a hand to stop any possible insinuations that might get thrown around. Don't go off the deep end. I'm not saying that I plan on falling into a depression anytime soon, especially when I just came out of one. What I'm saying is that I've done nothing but fight my whole life. What am I supposed to do now? Shining understood what the blonde was saying, now more so since he explained it. What could he do? Before you ask, I don't really have that many other skills. I do enjoy taking care of plants, but as a hobby. He said, stopping Shining from raising that single finger of his any further. I've done construction work, sort of, before, but that's it. Shining scratched the back of his head as the both of them continued to stare up at the sky, minds in turmoil. TCL. They'd made it to the mountain and were a good distance from where they entered. Naruto, once more saddled with bags that seemed larger than the others, kept pace with the other pony officers as the group began to move towards and under the arch that they'd seen from earlier. Said arch was pretty big. It seemed to be made from some pretty bulky stone smooth boulders that sat on top of one another from the edge in the ground to the top of the arch where it smoothed out towards the middle all the way to the bit where it connected to the mountain. All in all, it was another weird thing he jotted down as just equestrian stuff. They were currently slowly trekking through the middle bit of the archway, whose peak extended just a bit over 5 ponies high at its peak. Getting a closer look at it, he couldn't help but notice just how smooth the stone actually was. Those of the other groups thought so as well, as they all stared at it for a moment before moving on. Naruto stopped and stared for a moment as that ominous feeling came back. He observed the stone before getting his sleeve tugged on by Shining as the unicorn pulled him back into place next to him. Taking the blonde away from the steep drop by the trail they were following. Come on, we gotta stay together, Captain's orders, he said in a hushed voice, causing the blonde to take his eyes off the stone arch's connecting foot. He looked back one more time before nodding and the two caught up with the rest of the troops. Falling into rank next to Shining, who was in rank with one captain officer on each side, whom the bug team couldn't recognize, they marched on, their feet were taking them around the mountain, which upon its other side was canterlit. Naruto could see ahead to some of the other groups, keeping an eye out for one of his other recognizable companions. Morse and Sail were at the middle of the lines on each side of the formation, while Lumen and Bright were near the duo as they were near the back, but still ahead by maybe 2 to 4 lines. Naruto couldn't help but see Lumen focusing on the cliffs above them as look out. She let her eyes move to and fro before taking a moment to find his catching hers. She surprised him by nodding her head upwards at the cliffs and the ninja moved his head in that direction. He looked and looked but saw nothing as they moved. All of a sudden a single stone pebble fell from a cleft top up above. The sound of the rolling stone caused everyone to freeze as they all watched the stone pebble fall before passing it off as nothing. The stone rolled to the side of the formation where Lumen stood staring at it. Naruto for his part felt that ominous feeling from before increased by tenfold as he stared at the pebble. He stopped in place and closed his eyes, Shining stopping and frowning at him as he did. The unicorn was about to say something before he noticed that yellow and red lines began to trail up the sides of the blonde's eyes. The moment they looked complete though, he snapped his eyes in the direction of Lumen and seemed to blur to her. Most didn't know what happened next because it all seemed to happen too fast. The blonde had reached Lumen before anyone was even aware. After which, he grabbed and then threw her in the direction of her brother. Lumen could only watch in slow motion as something hit the blonde from the path off of the cliff. All could only watch as the blonde stayed airborne momentarily before time sped back up again. Yet that didn't stop them from hearing the blonde's yell. "We're surrounded." The world summarily erupted into chaos as a screech erupted from the previous location of the blonde bug teen. TCL. Shining could only gape, as did Bright, Morse, Lumen and Sail as they watched the blonde fall over the ledge. Most of those who saw it happen couldn't even believe it. Yet, that wasn't what spurred them into action. It was when the blonde's shout finally registered in their ears did the severity of the situation kick in. Squeak. They could all hear them. "Troops to the defense. Break off into groups of 5 each. I want 2 groups to a damn animal. Never turn your backs on them." Orders were shouted by Morse as the world became a cacophony of screeches and screams. Scorpolians. Those of higher command broke off into even numbers for each group, each once getting 1 commander and 2 lieutenants. Shining found himself in a group of Lumen, Bright and Morse, with 9 other junior officers falling behind them with involuntary movement as they held their lines together. He could see the fear in the eyes of the other juniors. Heck, he probably had some himself, but his mind was focused on other things. Like wondering whether Naruto had survived the fall or not. "Junior. Officer Shining armor and all other unicorns, barrier spells now." Bright shouted as his sister and he stood side by side. The call for barriers were quickly answered as each group was covered by a shielding construct made of energy. From which silence had fallen. He could hear the breaths of his fellow officers going rapidly. Some of them were probably still in shock at having some pony disappear like that. He was still reeling from it, but he shoved it down for later. No mourning on the battlefield. Lumen seemed like she was in the shock of her life. It must have been beyond shocking to have some pony who you didn't get along with basically save your life at the cost of their own. He looked around at all the other groups as they stopped moving, shields in place. He couldn't help but try to stretch his hearing to around them. All those in attendance could only listen as the scuttling of the Scorpolians rang about them. Shining was almost given a heart attack when something hit his shield, the defensive construct letting out a muted bang as the invisible animal hit it. Letting his heart slow down, he grinned as the beast couldn't get past his defense. Giggling slightly in relief, he turned back to the others inside as Morse code went about trying to come up with a plan. "We need a strategy. Side is compromised and we're being held down by heavy forces. The enemy is possibly 10 or more strong and we've allocated 13 officers to a presumed 10 units of opposition." He laid down the full grasp of the situation that they had, all the while the twins were looking to one another in worry. "We're dealing with Scorpolians, sir. We need a way to identify the targets for any assault to work." Morse knew that, but the headache to deal that particular problem was still going to come. They all looked to Morse for orders, and seeing this, he sighed. He thought of what they could do. They needed to be able to actually see the enemy to pull off any offensive right now. At the same time, the beasts couldn't get into the shields, thanks Celestia, but that wouldn't last forever. Third and last, they needed to find out where that goddess-forsaken sound was coming from. Adebayo. It was a series of shouts of similar wording, but that was just it. Where the heck was it coming from? Those all around were wondering themselves before there were several crashes at particular points by each of the formation. Following each crash was something that sounded like breaking stone and a squishy noises, each followed by a shriek of what could only be the Scorpolian. When the dust settled, many found themselves surprised to find a very interesting sight of several familiar-looking black carapace-covered beings with yellow eyes. Those in Shining spell could only look on in confusion before a shadow dropped down in front of them with a large swirling ball of light. The Damara Sengen. The world to the right of Shining erupted into a pasty-looking green of insectoid innards and body parts as the orb of light expanded and dispersed. Standing in the center of it all without a single bit of gunk on him was Naruto. Shining called out in relief. The bug teen simply smiled while giving a thumbs up. "Glad to know I made it in time. I honestly wasn't expecting the fall to take nearly as long as it did, but well, I found a way." There was movement from the blonde's back, showing a long thin wire-like tail that ended in a set of yellow thin sharp-looking prongs. "Holy crap, you're alive," Bright exclaimed as the rest of those in attendance nodded. Lumen looked like she'd seen a ghost as the blonde looked them over. "Good to see you guys are all good. Smart move on the barriers." He was speaking so casually. Like he hadn't just utterly demolished a pony-sized invisible scorpion. Morse asserted himself to the front of the group, all the while looking at the blonde with a frown. "Look, I'm glad you came to help, but we still need to handle the rest of the Naruto." Finished for him with a question. "The Scripolians," he said with a tilt of his head before turning back to the other sets of groups and barriers. The others followed his gaze, gaping at what they saw as the bug teen smiled. "I hope you don't mind that I might have made this a little bit easier for you." They all took in the scene of several more messes of Scripolian innards. Several of which were slightly bigger than others. Not only that, but by several other shields were explosions of color, various hues and the like. Most importantly though, was the multicolored scorpion shapes they could all see from within the defensive spells. There were 6 in total. Each of them various different colors, but the scope was the sizes of them. All were pony-sized. They all could only look on in awe before the blonde smirked. "I'd like to think that it's time for your comeback," he said, where Earth Pony Captain smirked himself. "Troops. To battle." The fight was on. The pony captains and their lieutenants were quick to overturn the tide of the battle once they could see the former invisible enemy. Scripolians were tipped and overturned by the combined brute force of the Earth Pony officers. Pegasi were used to be quick and efficient to aim for the soft undersides, while they were given defense by their horned compatriots and Naruto's clones. Bright and Lumen held up a shield for their captain as the junior officers locked down both of the claws. Morse code ran to its unprotected face and took out both of its eyes before leaping backwards. The lone beast was all that was left, only to find itself lifted by a currently yellow composite-eyed blonde bug teen before being slammed on its back, only to be finished off by a pair of shining and another unrecognizable trainee. It let off one more loud shriek before going limp. The groups as a whole cheered as the battle was won. Junior officers high-fived as they met up in the center of the path, while captains and lieutenants had their own forms of congratulations in handshakes and words of encouragement. Lumen found herself in a hug from her brother, causing her to flush before she returned it. Morse code simply wiped his brow. Shining was currently high-fiving another officer before he turned to do the same with Naruto, only to find the blonde looking over the archway in concern. "Hey Naruto," he called out, but the blonde seemed to only focus on the large stone overpass to care. Bright and Lumen came over, smiling and flushing, respectively. "Awesome job out there. Man. I didn't expect you to just come out of a fall like that, but when you did, it was amazing." Bright's praise fell on deaf ears as the blonde was still looking over at the arch. "What is this?" He could feel something. It had been a thing he noticed when they were fighting, but it seemed like, with each defeated scorpion-like enemy, this feeling grew stronger. And it was in this direction, right behind them. Morse code looked over to the group and was about to call them over before the blonde's eyes widened. Then the trail shook. It was a small rumbling, but it caught everybody's attention as they looked to the ground in confusion. Sailwind cursed. "Did we upset some of the geography? What's going on?" No Shining and the twin lieutenants turned to Naruto, who had a determined look on his face. "Something worse." Then those on the trail had all their eyes widened when the stone archway began to lift itself from its place connected to the floor. The large boulders in the side of the mountain shook before coming loose, as did a good subsection of the floor that the Scripolians probably came from. All said and done, once things stopped moving, everyone just stared. Gazes going higher and higher. And higher. At its peak, the arch of the tail was at least 4 stories in height. The body itself looked like the mountain, as if someone had taken an ice cream scooper and removed a chunk, with rocks protruding off the edges. The eyes that were 8 in number and wide in color stared back at them before the large pincers came to rest in front of it. All in all, most ponies simply fell on their knees as the being stared around them. It looked around at the bodies of dead Scripolians before focusing in the gathering of ponies. Its head tilted, its eyes narrowed, and it screeched. Shining couldn't do anything but let his sword drop, as did most of the others, as the noise blasted their eardrums. Their minds failing to come up with any sort of plan that might enable them to get away. Get away being the only option, because to fight this was suicide. Not like they had much options in running away, besides maybe falling down the mountainside. Which while Naruto might be able to live through, they could not. This was it. "Sorry Twilight, your BBBBF is not going to be coming home anytime soon, or at all. Bye Mom and Dad, make sure that when Spike visits that he remembers there was a brother who showed him hoofball cards." His eyes closed in finality of what was to come as the largest variant raised a pincer, easily the size of a large one-story home to sweep them. Cadence, I never got to tell you how much I really liked you. The pincer came down swinging and most could only watch as it did. 1 second it was down on them, the next it flew to the side accompanied by a shout of Databeo. They only watched in complete and utter confusion as the blonde bug teen floated for a moment before landing back onto the floor. Back to them, he turned his head to Shining, whose eyes snapped open in confusion. Don't go dying on me right now, Shining. It'd really suck to have you doing something like this while I'm right here, he said with a smirk as he turned back to the large insectoid. All the while he cracked his knuckles as his tail whipped about. Naruto, what are you? Shining asked before the blonde grinned. Didn't I tell you? He turned back to humongous Scripolian. He stopped for a moment before blurring to the front of the beast's face, a fist cocked back. I'm Uzumaki Naruto. His fist flew. And so did the beast. Its body flew with great velocity before impacting the side of the mountain it bore from, cratering the rock face. Shinobi. And so began the fight that would span a tale of one pony and the Goliath. And most would say it was built off the legend of an ant versus a scorpion. TCL. They say that nothing was impossible. Most ponies took it as purely a metaphor. It was a comforting phrase that helped push those beyond their mental boundaries to try harder. To push, excel and win. At that very moment, Shining was very sure that whoever said that line, that he'd want to meet that stallion or mare, give them the biggest hug in the world and buy them a full-course meal. Because he was sure they were speaking the literal truth as he gazed at the impossible. It was bug-like, stood on 2 feet, didn't know what a comic book was, and was blonde. The impossible named Naruto. Said bug person was currently situated, sitting, on top of the large Scripolian. Correction, the large corpse of the Scripolian. Which now lay in a large perfectly spherical crater in the mountain. Some scant few trails of greenish-teal blood ran down his face, his hair matted by it. His borrowed clothes of white long sleeve and blue sweats bearing wear and tear all over, his pants barely counted as shorts at this point. His right sleeve was currently missing, self-torn to wipe some of the blood off, and he was staring down at them with an accomplished grin. So when do we get this canterlit place? Also bride, I might need my clothes back if this is going to keep happening. Mine are way more durable, he said casually, as if talking about the weather. Most fell to their knees, while others fainted. Lumen was currently foaming at the mouth, last he checked. Shining. He was laughing like he'd just won the lottery. When Nightlight opened his front door that day, he'd had his wife and daughter present. Twilight, currently 9, had even gotten Spike from Celestia's care to greet her brother when he returned today. The adopted little Drake was currently situated next to his sister, clamoring on about how Shining would show up with something really cool. Like a scar or some mega weapon. A tale of some battle that would be told for years to come. In the future, Nightlight would commend Spike on his 4-year-old ability of precognition during his son's wedding. Opening his door, he was greeted by the sight of not only his grinning son, but also the nervously smiling form of a bug person next to him. The bug person was currently bearing a pair of medals around his neck in the form of the Royal Guard military. Mom, Dad, Twily, Spike. I'd like you to meet my friend Naruto. He waved over to the blonde in the patched-up orange and black tracksuit, who waved nervously. Hi. From outside, Twilight Velvet could see multiple ponies staring at the back of the blonde in question. Some gaping, while others stare in utter wonder. Twilight simply stared at her brother's friend before tilting her head cutely. What insect family do you come from? She wondered out loud. Giant bug. Spike grinned like the little boy he was. Shining scratched the back of his head as his father let them in. Along the way, Twilight and Spike kept looking at the bug teen, all the while asking questions. Velvet and Nightlight looked to their son in slight confusion. Shining, son, what's going on? Shining's father said as he watched his adopted dragon son hang from the tail of the stranger while Twilight turned his arm over and over while looking at it in wonder. Shining scratched the back of his head. Right, crazy story about that. Do we still have the guest room? Also, when is the next time Cadence plans on coming over? I wonder if my old room would still work. Shining, Twilight Velvet called out as Shining stopped. Twilight and Spike simply continued their childish ministrations as the blonde bug looked on. Oh right. Mom, Dad, you mind if Naruto crashes here for a little bit? He asked sheepishly. The blonde in question just blinked. Twilight Velvet was many things. A mother of 3, a rider of notable worth and best mom as denoted by her son Spike. She was also patient and understanding. She had to be, having had to basically raise 3 children, though luckily, no more than 2 at a same instance and occasion. Excuse me, Naruto. She started out, causing the buggy teen to look up at her from his position on the tree's side. Sitting parallel to the ground as he held a stick with a string on it holding a gem, while Spike did his absolute best to try and catch it. Seeing the mother of Shining giving him a worried look, he smiled before allowing him to fall off the tree and land safely on the ground, handing a slightly tuckered out Spike the emerald gem. The tired Drake child simply grinned before stuffing his prize into his mouth. Kids truly were simple sometimes. Stretching, he eyed the mother of three. Twilight Velvet seemed like she was pretty used to shenanigans when it came to her kids. Bearing pale lavender and white striped hair and tail, a pale gray fur color, and light baby blues for eyes. On her left hand was what looked like 3 purple stars. She was dressed in a pair of slightly puffy gray blouse with a white skirt. Eyeing him slightly, she couldn't help but wonder. I couldn't help but wonder. It's been a month and I don't think I've seen you in anything other than that tracksuit you're fond of or a long sleeve and sweatpants combo, she noted, to which the blonde froze. He didn't know why, but that trail of thoughts she was probably having was setting off the alarms in his head. Was there something wrong with him wearing what he got from the Royal Guard for clothing? All day, every day. Except for those few times that he wore his tracksuit. Why was this trail of thoughts worrying him so? Yeah. Shining and the other guys from the Royal Guard gave them to me when they found out about my lack of other apparel, he said in an unsure tone. Velvet's eyes closed as she thought, her brows coming together as she put her mind to use. Nightlight was out for work elsewhere and Shining was at the Royal Guard HQ in the princess's castle going through drills. Naruto would have gone with him, but they wouldn't be taking the blonde in just yet. Something about making his verification paperwork. Besides the point, Twilight, her daughter, was currently also at the castle, studying under the princess. It was just her, Spike and Naruto. The only reason Spike was here was because Velvet had asked for him to be. Plus, the little Drake seemed to grow greatly attached to the bug teen. Stating that, and she quotes, he's different from every pony else. Like me. She'd honestly felt a little heartbroken by that. That her son, as he was nothing less than that, could speak such words of alienation. It was of the many reasons she asked for him today. That said, she couldn't help but open her eyes and turn her gaze on the blonde teen as he flinched under her stare. She looked for a little longer before nodding. Boys, or really Spike, time to put on some outside attire. We're going clothes shopping. She declared with urgency, causing the blonde to show an expression of horror as Spike was simply chewing on his treat. The life of a child was truly blissfully ignorant. TCL. Come on you two. We're simply going to get a few clothes for Naruto and maybe even get Spike a new Odyssey, Velvet said with enthusiasm, holding Spike's hand as the group traveled the streets of Canterlot's marketplace. Naruto could only grumble behind her as they walked. His mind filled with the future torture of being thrown through a hurricane of clothes and apparel. His mind drifted back to the few times he and Ino hung out, usually with either Choji and or Shikamaru present, and he noticed that she'd almost always be ready to shop when he was around. To this day, he still wasn't sure why. As they passed shop after shop, the blonde allowed his eyes to wander. For the most part, from what he could gather from Shining and the rest of the guys and gals in the Royal Guard, Canterlot was basically a place for royalty, nobles and the well-off. The place was pretty well kept. Streets were clean, light fixtures were luminescent, and the ponies were, for the most part, as snooty as one would expect. He watched as another pair of ponies passed, their eyes catching his before they shoved their noses high into the air. He rolled his eyes at them before making a rude gesture, causing them to look appalled. He snickered some before he got hit in the back of the head by a purse by Shining's mom, or Shiny as she called him. The blonde still wasn't going to let that one die. He had to get his mileage, and Bright would get his. Junior Shiny was going to be a thing. Rubbing his injury, he turned back to catch Velvet's turned disapproving look, causing him to wilt. He'd never known a mother's love, but he already knew that he didn't like a mother's disappointment. It was more than a little bit unnerving. "Sai Naruto, you shouldn't do those kinds of things in front of Spike. You know that he looks up to you, almost as much if not more so than Shining," she said, bringing his attention to the small Drake. Spike was currently looking at him in confusion as he sucked on his thumb. Those eyes of emerald green seemed to search his soul in that moment of eye contact. Once seemingly done, Spike turned his head back ahead as Velvet nodded. Naruto scratched the back of his chitin-covered head before slumping. "Sorry," he let out in a drone. She smiled at him. "I know that some of the ponies around here can be a bit standoffish," he snorted at this and mumbled a few things. Her glare kept him silent. "But that doesn't mean you should let them get to you," she finished sagely before looking both ways and leaning in. "Besides, they have a pole shoved so far up their plots, I'm sure they lift their nose so high up so they can breath." She whispered to him, causing him to look at her in shock before he laughed. "Oh, this mare." She laughed herself as Spike looked on confused. Looking down at the Drake, the blonde ruffled his head fins as they moved on. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad. TCL. Why, oh why did he tempt fate? Currently he was standing in front of Velvet as she looked him up and down. His current set of attire was a pair of jeans with a white undershirt and a dark blue vest. Giving him one last look over, she laughed sheepishly. "I guess Nighty's clothing style doesn't really fit you," she said. He sent her a look before sighing. He had a feeling this was going to be interesting. The next moment found the blonde ninja in a set of white long cargos with an orange sweater jacket top. The top left unzipped so that he could see the black shirt underneath that bore the sign of a crossing set of halberds. The collar came up enough that he could pull his head down slightly to cover his mouth if he wanted to. Velvet looked him over once more before she nodded at him. "That looks so nice." He smiled nervously at her. "Great, so we'll just take this," and she threw him a look. "Naruto, that's the first outfit. We still have so many more to go through. One for formal occasions, informal occasions, funerals, weddings, PTA meetings," and she trailed on. That list had more points than he had inches in height. The next moment had the blonde in a tux. The blazer was open to show the white dress shirt underneath and the black dress pants were seemingly made of the finest silk. He turned himself over in it as he looked in the mirror. Okay, he didn't mind the suit as much as he thought he would, so that was a plus. The downside was apparently that this suit was for his wedding. How far ahead did this mare try to think? Next thing you know, he'll be looking at the suit he'd be wearing for his own funeral. He spotted Spike just sitting there in a giant purple bunny onesie. He was currently nibbling at the end of his spade-like tail, idly sucking on the edges. At least one of them was enjoying this. "Ooh, we've got pick one up for the day of Shining's promotion to lieutenant." He sighed. TCL. He shuffled in place as he sat in the chair next to Spike. He was very aware of the stares he got as Velvet shuffled through the clothing aisle after aisle before setting herself up in front of them. The blonde eyed the mountain of clothing articles with trepidation. Sweet Kami. They were going to be here all day. Unless. "Naruto, you're a genius." He couldn't help but to pat himself on the back. This plan couldn't possibly backfire. He chuckled sinisterly as he walked over to Velvet, who was trying to decide what combination of blouses to choose. Ahem. "Hey Velvet." He tried to get her attention. "Hold on, Naruto, I'll try on the first set soon." Now would this do good with my mumble? She didn't really hear him, but that was okay, he had a surefire plan for this. Velvet was currently trying to choose between the maroon blouse and the wine red cardigan before she caught sight of a flash of light out the corner of her eye. Turning to it, she froze as she found herself in the audience of herself. She slowly turned away from her mountain of clothes to take in the sight of her mirror image. Slowly reaching up to touch her face, the copy did the same. Tapping the top of her head, it followed. It was as she got a closer look at her double, she noticed that the clothes she was wearing. Then all of a second, her eyes snapped wide. "Then Naruto?" She shakily uttered as she saw her reflection grin at her. "In the flesh. Or in this case, in your flesh," he said before grimacing. "That sounded way better in my head." Velvet seemed too shocked to notice. How? Why? She was needing some help there and so he obliged her. He held up a finger with a grin. "Easy. I've always been able to do this. I just never showed you guys because it honestly never came up. I figured since you're going to want to try on just about every combination of clothing I thought might as well make this faster. Plus this. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." The next instant there was smoke before Velvet found herself nearly fainting in shock as well as the other patrons of the store. Then Velvet stood in a line. Each of them grinning like a certain blonde teen she was getting to know. Naruto was too happy with himself to notice the encroaching darkness of Velvet's shadow visage. His eyes closed and grin on his face, he was ever the oblivious one. His first notion that something was wrong was the shiver he felt down his spine. The second was when he noticed just how quiet it had gotten in the store. His third was when he felt that iron-like grip on his shoulders. So he blinked and opened his copy Velvet's eyes and saw his doom. Twilight Velvet's eyes had become shining stars in the darkness that her bangs casted over her face. A mockery of a polite smile played against a shadowy background. Naruto, he froze at the sight, but when she spoke his name, he knew right then and there. He was fucked. You also wouldn't happen to be able to change into a few other ponies, would you? He gulped audibly. TCL. He simply allowed his head to loll backwards over the back edge of the bench. His eyes closed as he simply tried to relax. Spike currently was by his side as they sat in the park. Velvet was long gone, with a small group of his clones carrying all the clothes both bought for him, her, and the rest of her family. Spike had kept the onesie though. "Ugh, Spike, how you hanging in there, buddy?" He used enough energy to look over at the small Drake who was currently kicking his feet back and forth happily. Smiling at him, he looked over in the distance to a small cart vendor. "Come on little man, I'll get you some ice cream for being my best friend of the day," he said as he got onto his feet. Waiting for Spike to follow, he held the little boy's hand before they walked over to the vendor of the sweet cold treats. Several moments later, they were walking away from a confused stallion who didn't know what kind of sick joke he was in. The bug man and a baby dragon walk up to an ice cream cart. What was the punchline? As they left a pony in a state of utter confusion, they made their way through the park proper. The ninja was happy to be stretching his legs, while Spike was currently enjoying his ice cream to the best of his ability. Each couple they passed couldn't help but stop and stare at the pairs. A duo of non-equines just casually walking through the park, and they were the center of all the talk going around. Or maybe it was the sight of an adorable baby dragon and a bunny, honestly. Who knew? Finding a spot by a picnic table, the two settled down for a bit, taking the occasional lick of their dairy treats as they vacantly watched the world pass them by. Taking another appreciative lick of his ice cream, Spike couldn't help but notice how Naruto, his BBBB best big bug bro, seemed to look at his ice cream with a small smile. The Drake licked his once more as he stared at the blonde. Naruto couldn't help but chuckle as he looked at the frozen treat. Mind flashing back to two similar instances of eating a frozen treat with his own teachers. Iruka-sensei. Hiro-senin, he thought solemnly before looking at Spike, who was staring at him with a curious look. Ice cream not good? The kid dragon asked, causing the blonde to blink before he chuckled once more. Taking a decently large chomp before giving Spike a grin right before his face broke out into a pained expression. Why did I do that? He massaged his temple as he groaned. Brain freeze, bad idea. Really bad idea, he uttered, causing Spike to giggle before he looked at Naruto again. This time the blonde noticed the look of focus on Spike's face. Naruto is happy? This question caught Naruto off guard as he looked down at his smaller male companion. Spike himself was looking at his ice cream, rolling the cone in his hand before stopping and doing it again. What do you mean, Spike? The little dragon looked up at him. Naruto looked sad. Did some pony do something to you? The frown on the little Drake's face just made the blonde feel guilty. He didn't want Spike catching his melancholy. Especially not now. Placing his hand on Spike's head, he ruffled his spines. No need to worry, Spike, just thinking about some amiibo, some pony I used to know. The Drake gave him a look. Archway. Naruto smiled. Yeah, something like that. I'm probably not going to be seeing that person for a while. He and me used to eat ice cream like this every now and again. I guess I was just remembering. He said with a small smile before Spike gave him a look. Shoving his ice cream in Naruto's face. Ice cream? We can have ice cream all the time. Then you can tell your friend about it. The blonde merely looked at the slightly melting frozen treat before his mind caught up to Spike's words and he laughed. The Drake seemed to frown before he found his ice cream bumping against Naruto's own. Yup. We'll have ice cream too. We'll try every flavor there is and every kind there must be. Then when I meet that person again, I'll tell him all about them and my little buddy who helped me eat them. He grinned, causing the little Drake's eyes to shine as he nodded. They settled back into their seats, enjoying their treats. The blonde felt a little lighter that day. TCL. Cleaning up Spike's face after they were done at the water fountain, the two continued. Spike for his part wanted to go play on the swings and Naruto was willing to indulge him. It was as they were walking the path that Naruto found himself watching as Spike ran off in some random direction with a yell of Twilight. Causing the buggy teen to look up to find the Odyssey wearing Spike, hugging a surprised lavender sundress-clad form of Twilight. The 9-year-old unicorn was surprised to find her little brother hugging her at the moment before she looked up to see an incoming Naruto. The composite-eyed teen let out a small wave as Spike began to babble on to Twilight about his day. Then we got ice cream. Now we're gonna go and play on the swings. The Drake finished, Twilight's eyes going wide as she turned to the blonde. You went shopping with mom? The tone she had when she said who he went shopping with made it all clear. He had survived. He was triumphant. He basked in the fake glory. Hehehe, kind of, yeah. Your mom is crazy picky, he commented, running a finger under his nose as Celestia's protege nodded. She knew just how eager her mother could be when it came to some things. Much less clothes. Naruto changed into mom. Then made all these copies and we got through it in no time. Turning to Naruto to ask what Spike meant but instead found another her. She stared at the copy as Spike ran over to her double. See, he said as he jumped around the other her. She tried and rationalize how this could be possible. As far as she knew, there were no spells for such a thing. Maybe Naruto was a high-powered unicorn. Or a bicorn. She'd never seen one. Wait, did bicorns even exist? He did have 2 horns, or possibly. She would have continued this train of thought were it not for feeling someone tapping her on the head, bringing her out of her reverie. She looked up at the normal form of Naruto as he smiled at her. You doing okay there, Twilight? You looked like you saw your doppelganger, he smirked as Spike giggled. Why, you're impossible. There's no known pony, not even the princess, that can do that. The very statistical chance of any pony being able to change like that is impossible. I've never seen anything like that in the princess's library. She nearly knocked him over with her exclamations before he put a hand to her head. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Easy there, Twilight. Deep, even breath. The eldest of the three, words caused her to take a moment to stop and do as he said. Several deep breaths later, she let out one more expulsion of air before looking down at the floor. Her cheeks burning a fierce red as she hid her face behind her large backpack. Eyes peeking over the edge, she apologized. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. It's just I've never read a book about you before. I've read about griffins, minotaurs, donkeys, mules, zebras, the Sadleian ponies. She began to ramble again, causing the blonde to pat her once more on the head, causing her to squeak and cover face with her bag again. Twilight. I get it. You've never seen something like me before, you don't need to go all textbook on me. I have a hard enough time getting textbooks as is. She felt like her face was going to burn off, but she took one more deep breath, allowing her enflamed face to cool slightly. I'm sorry. I'm just surprised that we've never heard of your kind before. He simply nodded at her before adding. Well, it's not like I know what I am either. For the most part I'm still finding out about all this. He gestured towards myself. Twilight looked at the blonde and thought before she smiled a big smile. We can document you. I mean, if we put this all down on paper, we could have the first account of your kind in Equestria. We might get our names added to the library's authors list. Her eyes shined in the shape of her cutie mark, nearly blinding Naruto himself. Well, at least she wasn't embarrassed anymore. TCL. There was much to be said about Twilight Sparkle. She was young, but smart. She endeavored to live up to the title of Celestia's student. She had a distinct taste for pistachio ice cream and was an avid reader. Also, she was kind of awkward in social situations, joined the club, and she was a great rider for her age. Naruto, however, could say with the utmost confidence that Twilight Sparkle, Celestia's student and little sister to Shining while older to Spike, was one more thing. She really tanked hard when it came to anything artistic. She could make all the funny-looking schemas, equations and formulas she wanted. She just plain sucked at drawing. Not that Naruto was that much better, but he was not one for documenting pictures hand-drawn anyway. Moose. And Spike's words were definitely more on track with what the blonde was thinking, sending a currently face-booking Twilight even further into her hard-covered book. It looks kind of like a deer. His own input seemed to just make the impression of her face into hard leather that much more distinct. Her groans caused him to laugh nervously as he scratched the side of his forehead. Spike chose to instead pick up a pencil and began scribbling on a piece of paper. Naruto for his part tried to get Twilight's face out of her book. In the more literal sense of the word. Come on, Twilight. Come on, it's not that bad. She removed her face from the hardcover to give him an annoyed look. Not that bad. I drew you as a moose. Arg. Book held a face once more and he just sweat dropped. Well, at least she wasn't denying it. Authors. He found something shoved into his face from a pleased-looking Spike. With the paper so close up, the blonde could barely see the colors on it. Something black and yellow, but he wasn't sure. Spike. Little buddy. I can't really see. His words granted his vision back, only for Spike to repeat his words. Authors? He said, but it sounded more like a question. Looking over at the Drake, he saw what he was showing him and chuckled. Twilight. You might want to look at this, he said, without moving his head away from the sight. Twilight, who deemed it inappropriate to cover one's face with a book undeserving of it, regardless of how much she still wanted to, looked over at Naruto wondering what he was talking about. She caught sight of the paper in Spike's hand and stared for a moment. On the sheet of wood product was a picture. A picture of a black and yellow-looking figure in what seemed like clothes. Mind you, she understood that it was Naruto, obviously from the tale, but what she found out about it was. It still looked better than her own. Her eye twitched. TCL. He made sure that Spike was set in the clone's lap before the blonde set himself up in his own. Twilight choosing to sit in the middle of the two on the last swing as she held a notebook in hand. On the cover was the picture that Spike drew, much to her indignance. Set himself up for a good rhythm, he started off. Luckily there weren't that many ponies nearby, if any. Those that were here began to empty out for the moment. So ask away, Twilight, he said as he leisurely moved back and forth, legs kicking every so often. The young unicorn smiled before looking down at her notebook. The reference, how tall are you? And the questioning continued like that. Each time she asked a question, he gave an answer that would be described to the best of his ability. What food he ate, how he transformed, his lack of flying capability, he was sad about this one, his 2 horns, was he capable of magic? She wanted to test this when they could, and other such things. One of the questions she asked though did have him wondering. You have the ability to transform, but what is the biggest thing you've changed into? He and his clone actually stopped at that, causing Spike to whine. The clone kept swinging, leaving things up to the original. The blonde bug couldn't really say he had tried transforming into anything that wasn't a pony, human, or bipedal. If he wanted to be truly technical, he'd transformed with Henge into the Kyuubi before, but that involved Gamabunta. Holy shit. The blonde stopped with a look of shock on his face before he scrambled off his swing seat. Standing up and moving away from Twilight, who looked at him in confusion. Naruto? What happened? She inquired bemusedly as he scratched the back of his head before grinning. You just reminded me of something. I just hope this works. He said before bringing the soft underside of his thumb to his mouth. Making the incision with his canine, not his bigger fangs due to habit, and ran through a set of hand signs before bringing them down on the ground. Fuchiyus no Jutsu. He spoke the jutsu name before being enveloped by a decently sized smoke cloud. What the who summoned me? The last time I remember being summoned, a slightly deep voice echoed out from the cloud before it cleared, leaving all those in attendance dropping their jaw. The clone stopped swinging with Spike as he stared at who was left in the smoke. Luckily Spike found himself preoccupied by the side of the giant frog. He grinned. Huh? What the is that, a horse? That a talking lizard? Gamakichi asked as another figure walked in front of him before grinning. Gamakichi? Man, am I glad to see you. The giant toad blinked for a moment before turning to the bug teen standing in front of him. His horizontal pupils seemed to focus in on him for a moment before trailing up to the mop of blonde on top of his head and gasping. Naruto? The blonde himself grinned as if Christmas had come early. It was but a moment before the two bumped fist, the blonde laughing all the while. Twilight at that point dropped her pen, notepad in her jaw. The clone next to her saw fit to close the last one, lest she catch flies. The toad looked at the blonde's new form. Naruto? Where have you been? Ma and Pa have been worried sick. Much more so, everyone else is wondering where you went. The blonde scratched the back of his head for a moment before he looked up at his first ever true toad summon. It's been a long story, a really long story. I just need you to reverse summon me to Mount Myabakuzan, he stated, only to find the toad wearing a frowning expression. His face only morphed to match the expression on his longtime friend's. Pitchy? The blonde's inquiring tone caused the toad to sigh. Naruto, you may not realize it, but we've been trying to reverse summon you for a while now. As in, ever since you haven't returned back, the moment pain revived all the lost lives. His words caused the blonde to stiffen before his expression fell. So you mean? Gamakichi nodded his head solemnly. Trying to get you back has been fruitless, and not from lack of trying. Naruto kind of slumped over as he listened to the news before he sighed. He ruffled his hair as he looked down at his feet. Damn. I kind of had a feeling, but I was still the smallest bit hopeful, you know. The summon nodded his head, yet before the conversation could continue, they were interrupted by dual shouts. Wait, Naruto, what is this? Trixie demands to know how to summon giant toads. The duo of Toad and Bug only stared for a moment before turning to find Twilight had gotten up and there was another small blue unicorn filly by the swingset. Crap. DCL. The little azure unicorn, Trixie, was not swayed. Naruto could only hold his head in his hands as Gamakichi laughed in the background. Trixie demands to know the spell to summon giant creatures. She must be able to summon creatures to set upon her enemies. Twilight merely looked at Trixie in confusion before the azure filly turned to her. And you? She pointed her finger dramatically, causing Twilight to flinch before pointing a finger at herself. Me? Yes, you. Dear Twilight Sparkle. You became Celestia's student when you just entered the school. Once Trixie beats you, she will be called the greatest of all the students. The lavender-colored filly merely rubbed her hands against one another. Do we have to? Trixie's gaze turned determined. Yes. Trixie must beat you to gain access to the summoning beast spell. That caught Naruto's attention. Wait, what? Trixie merely turned to him with a satisfied expression. Obviously, you're Sparkle's master outside of Celestia. You were planning on teaching her your spell, but Trixie found you. She will win the right to summon a majestic creature. Naruto merely looked on, still confused, before hearing her last words. He cracked a smirk before pointing back at Gamakichi. Him? He was about to snort, but the hard slap to the back of the head from Kichi had him steadying himself. The toad merely grinned. At least she has good taste. Naruto merely grumbled before he thought about the situation and grinned an impish grin. So you wish to fight my pupil, Twilight Sparkle, do you? You wish to gain the ability to summon the, mighty and majestic toads of Mount Myabakuzan. He said in a larger-than-life voice, causing both fillies to turn to him before Trixie nodded eagerly. Then you must pass my 3 challenges. This was all for the sake of hamming it up. He was doing this for two reasons. 1. To create some entertainment for himself. 2. To get Twilight some friends. Kami above knew she needed one. A rival was always a good place to start. Hopefully she didn't follow his example in rivals though. What no? Trixie accepts. TCL. I can't believe you did that. Yawn, that was tiring, Twilight commented from his back as Spike was well asleep on his clone's back as they walked home. Hey, in the end you had fun. Besides, you need to make friends. In the end it seemed more like she was Spike's friend than yours, he commented. They had dropped off the azure-colored 8-year-old at some elder-looking pony. Though they did nearly give him a heart attack. Amakichi was quickly sent home afterwards with a promise from Naruto to summon Ma and Pa later. He felt Twilight thump him once on his back, weak as the blow was, even for a child. That's only because she showed him some of her magic tricks, she grumbled into his back. You mean the ones you couldn't do? He heard her grumble some more. I could have done it if I had some time. He merely smiled. Hey, it's not like you didn't show some of your own stuff as well. Well, you both have some good tricks, you still beat her with that small time teleportation spell. So you guys are about even. Maybe you can trade spells sometime, he stated to a quickly becoming drowsy Twilight. Yawn, I don't think so. Z. He listened as she finally fell asleep before shaking his head. It wasn't like she didn't have fun though. He remembered seeing the smile on her face as she went against Trixie. The blue unicorn filly herself probably didn't notice it either. If they ever just got together to talk, they'd probably be the best of friends. Sasuke looked skyward at the setting sun. His mind going back to his once-upon-a-time friend, wondering what the Uchiha must be doing at this point. I wonder if you ever did get your wish and if you'll just come back to Konoha afterwards, he muttered as he continued on. Him and his clone, carrying a pair of sleeping children. TCL. Heading to the Light Velvet household, Naruto was quickly ushered inside by Nightlight and Twilight Velvet. Taking their children from the blonde's care. Thanks Naruto, it's good to know that they're home. Safe and sound, Nightlight said as he cradled his daughter in his arms. Dressed for bedtime, he was in his yellow pajamas while Velvet was clad in a bathrobe holding Spike. No problem Mr. Light. It was good to hang around with the both of them today. It's only right that I make sure they come home without worry, Naruto said quietly, causing the two to smile. Before he was about to go to the couch, Velvet spoke up. Oh, there's some food left on the table. Spike and Twilight won't be able to have theirs, but you can share some out for yourself, she said, before leading off to Spike's shared room with Twilight, Nightlight right behind her. Nodding his head before she left, he made his way to the kitchen, turning the lights on. He spotted the pot of food and looked in to find some spaghetti with parmesan. I'm seriously starting to like this stuff. It ain't no ramen, but it's definitely a close second, he said as he shared himself out some before taking a seat at the table. Swirling the fork in his hand before bringing the food to his mouth, he chewed and enjoyed the cheesy flavor. The mother's cooking, huh? He took another bite, I guess I've been missing out on this. He finished off the night with a full stomach and a small smile. TCL. A week later. Come on boys, another set and you're done. Can you keep up Naruto? Please remember I'm leading by 20. The scene of the backyard of the Light Velvet household was a sight full of sweat, Slider otherwise, cheering from Spike and viewing from the wife of the household. Nightlight held the watch as time ticked by. His normal combo of dress pants, shirt and vest changed. In place was a visor and no vest as he finally clicked down on the stopwatch. Time. He called out, causing both of the boys to stop. One falling back from sit-up position, sweating profusely. The other was sweating only slightly, all the while checking the weighted bands around his forearms, shins, chest, head, neck and biceps. Naruto finished his inspection of the weighted equipment before sitting up next to the gasping Shining. The unicorn officer gave him a look of disbelief. What kind of pony are you? He wheezed out as the blonde smirked. The kind that still did 30 more sit-ups than you, with weighted clothes. Also, not a pony. The bug team grinned impishly as Shining let his head fall. Nightlight moved over to them with Spike at his side, the small Drake carrying a set of towels. Good job boys. Shining, you got 59 sit-ups in under a minute, a new record for you. Naruto though, beat you out by 31, a total of 90 sit-ups, Shining's dad commented, causing the white unicorn to groan as Naruto got both towels, tossing one at Shining's head. The white unicorn allowed the cooler than him cloth to stay there as Naruto gave Spike a little high five. Shining, remember you promised to pick up Twilight today. I heard Cadence would be there, Shining's mother sang. All those in the yard never saw a unicorn recover so fast as the junior officer seemed to kip up and dash off inside to take a shower, all in one moment. The rest simply laughed as Shining's yelp reached their ears. Ah. The water. It's cold. TCL. Naruto looked over at Shining as the two walked down the park path. The buggy one wearing a large dark blue shirt with a yellow circle on the front and back that said, "Here comes the awesome." Wearing a pair of tan shorts with dark brown bars going down halfway of the pants legs. "Geez man, cool it. You act like you've never seen Cadence before. Also, nice comb over," the blonde said mockingly as Shining finished with his hair once more before sending the blonde non-equine a sour look. Wearing a clean pressed white long-sleeve dress shirt and dark dress pants, Shining continued to mess around with his hair. Reaching into his breast pocket of his brown light jacket, he pulled out a half-eaten pack of mints, tossing one back. Naruto simply shook his head before snatching the mint package from Shining and taking one for himself. "Naruto. What are you doing? I need those," Shining said as he snatched back the package. Naruto sent him a flat look. It was 1 mint. Shining was not moved. "Yeah, my 1 mint. I only have so many left," Naruto deadpanned. "Shining, you bought that today. Half an hour ago. You finished half of them already." The unicorn looked appalled. "What if I need to freshen up?" Naruto rose and eyebrowed him. "Please, if there's anything Cadence will be suffering from this evening, it'll be your minty fresh breath." The blonde shot out, only to find the unicorn was now gargling water from a fountain, causing him to fassip him. "Dude. Calm down. You're blowing this way out of proportions." Shining couldn't help but snort. "What do you know about love, Naruto? You wouldn't be saying this if you were the one with a true affection for some pony." His P said, he went back to gargling. The bug merely shrugged his shoulders. "Newsflash, I've had crushes before. Well, one, but that's beside the point. I wasn't this bad. Then again, he never did get Sakura to date him. The few times they went out to eat together, it always seemed to involve someone coming in about a quarter of the way, or they were in a group to begin with. He definitely wouldn't be stressing it like Shiny was, though. He totally wasn't slightly envious that Shining's pink-haired furred crush actually gave him the time of day. He did not have issues. Totally. Once the unicorn male was done gargling, they continued onward. Roaming through parkways in search of a certain little unicorn foal and her foal-sitter. Humming up on a small hill, the duo found themselves looking from their vantage point before Shining's gaze stopped in one direction and he started breathing a slight bit faster. Taking notice of Shining's escalating condition, he rolled his eyes already knowing what caused it before looking in the direction Shining was looking. Finding the obvious cause for his friend's now inept ability to keep his cool. That cause was currently sitting with a pair of Twilight and Trixie who seemed to be arguing over something. With hair that was pink, purple, slight red and yellow, and clear purple eyes sat an alicorn. Either a winged unicorn or a Pegasus with a horn, he'd given up trying to guess which. With a short-sleeved blouse of a more tie-dye nature of colors that matched her hair. Pants that were a dark pink and with her hair in a ponytail, princess to love and all things romantic, mi amor cadenza or Cadence, cut quite the casual figure. Too bad, Shining didn't notice this. So smitten was he that when Cadence waved he locked up. Naruto waved and moved one arm behind Shining to wave for him. Ah, the responsibilities of a wingman or wing pony in this case. Truly, the responsibility of being a bro. Walking on down, or in Shining's case, shuffling every 5 inches, they duo met up with a trio of females of 2 foals and 1 teenager. Walking over, Naruto tossed a hey in Cadence's direction. "Hey Katie, what's going on?" The blonde decided that Shining would come to eventually. He usually did. "Naruto." She gave him a hug, to which he returned. Cadence did have something that could make Shining weak in the knees. Oh, he knew Shining wasn't shallow, he'd been chasing after her since apparently middle school, but Naruto could admit that Cadence was well and curvy. She was nice and seemed to want to bring ponies together through the power of love, which was all good and dandy, but he could feel the hug turn into a harsh grip around his torso and he refused to look down. Naruto, that sing-song voice of hers did little to make him want to look down, but a light pink aura surrounded him and he had little choice but to. That smile was on her face again. Ever since Shining had, stumblingly, introduced the two of them, they got along fine. For the most part, while a little hesitant at first, Cadence was a nice mare who could look past appearance and see the person, or pony, within. Sadly, she had this little tick of wanting everybody to find love and being her friend made him the target of her more aggressive tactics. He honestly hoped she outgrew it because it made some of these meetings into interrogations given enough time and enough attention on himself. "So Naruto, found any pony you fancy yet? I know I saw this interesting looking mare who worked at the astronomy wing. Moonbeam, I think was her name. She has a little sister in the same school as Twilight and I heard she's single. Oh geez, that poor mare in Cadence's sights." Unfortunately for that poor mare, Cadence was quite persistent if she had you in her sights for too long. "No Cadence, I haven't. Please, can we just drop this? Pretty please, with those micro teddy bear marshmallows you like on top. I mean, just look over there, a perfectly good shining armor. He passed the buck as he really didn't want to deal with this at the moment. She gave him that look that said this isn't over before slipping on over to, just coming to, shining. Seeing her coming though, was quick to send the stallion into another fit before she latched onto him with a hug and cry of shiny. The blonde had never seen someone go so red since Hinata. Because I love you Naruto. He held a hand to his head and sighed as the memory came to him. He'd really messed up before coming here. Walking over to the now staring forms of Twilight and Trixie, Naruto crouched down and grinned at them. "Ma Naruto. Master." The twin cries, with one being quick to amend herself, of the fillies caused him to snicker. Twilight let out a groan as Trixie turned her gaze her way with a sneer. "He will not be your master for long Sparkle, don't try and trick Trixie." The lavender one simply let her face fall into the book she was holding as Naruto simply sat there amused. "Aha, so you're finally acknowledge me, young Twilight. Trixie has been a good influence on you. 'Tis a good day to find such young and applicable students," he stated with that oh so impish grin Twilight was coming to hate, all the while Trixie merely puffed out her chest in pride. As Trixie would expect. She thumped her chest once, ruffling the denim dress. She was currently wearing a set of black shorts and to finish off in her hair was a small metal clip of a wand. "I keep telling you that he's not my master. Besides that's not important," Twilight started, causing Naruto to mockingly grab his chest. "Ah. The pain of being crushed by my own student's words. Is this the feeling of a wayward student gone rogue?" Trixie, ever the gullible one for these kind of dramatics, was quick to console the blonde. "Worry not, master. Trixie shall never abandon your ways that you haven't taught Trixie yet." Twilight sent her an annoyed look. "Stop doing that. He's faking it, besides we have to get this spell done before class tomorrow. Were it not for a certain blue pony, I'd be done already." Trixie turned back to her rival. It's sad that Trixie is a better student than the student of the princess. Trixie already said that she can get some strings set up to make it and the two devolved into an argument, leaving the blonde bug teen to simply look at them with a small smile. Ah, to have a rival. Different ways of seeing things. Two perspectives and personalities. While they fought, the blonde felt the presence of Shining and Cadence come up behind him, causing him to look back at them. Seeing the stiff form of Shining holding on to the giggling Cadence, the blonde silently nodded to them, shooing them off. Turning back away from the side of the leaving couple, he found himself looking at the forgotten book sitting between the two standing children. Figuring that nothing was wrong with taking a look at the book, he picked it up and looked over the page. The minor transmogrification spell. He wasn't sure what it meant, but looking over the lettering the blonde took a guess. It was like a small transformation on an object. A hinge that affected small objects, but completely. Not a hardened illusion, but an honest-to-goodness change from one object to another. Reading the instructions, he idly wondered. Did he have magic? Sure, the sight of spells happening didn't really bother him too much, but he never really bothered to think about trying and performing some spells of his own. Too caught up in trying to fit in with this place was he that he didn't really think about it. Especially when he already had his chakra. Then again, what about when he changed? Without the use of chakra or jutsu, how did he change the way he did? Setting the book down, he cupped his chin, tongue flicking out at lips in thought. The two fools stopped arguing for a moment to stare at him. "Master?" Naruto. Hearing their calls, he shook his head and turned his attention on the two of the curious-looking girls. "Ah. Oh, nothing girls, just wondering about this spell of yours." Hearing this, Twilight eyes looked at him in confusion, while Trixie merely laughed. Of course. Trixie should have thought of this before. "Master, please help us solve this spell." She bowed to him, actually making him flush slightly. Konohamaru had been his student, true, but he'd never been so formal about it. Being called boss was fun, but it was more of a brotherly mentorship. Twilight looked like she'd been forced to swallow a lemon. "We can't do that. This is our homework and we have to do it ourselves," Twilight said, with an annoyed frown. Trixie threw one right back at her. Trixie really shouldn't be so surprised, Sparkle. She wonders if you even want to get this done with. Twilight's temple developed a vein. Naruto, seeing this, was quick to try and settle things before they got out of hand. "Look Trixie, I'd love to help you guys, but Twilight is right," he said, causing the two to look to him in shock before Twilight smiled. "See, I was right," she said with a little jig while Trixie looked betrayed. He scratched the back of his head before adding. "Besides, I'm not sure if I could do any of these spell things anyway. Never had to before." This caused the both of them to look at him in shock. Well, Twilight looked at him with another curious look going from his face to his horns. Trixie looked put out, arms lumping to her sides, before she adopted a thinking expression. Trixie gets it. Her master is so good, he doesn't realize he's using magic. The two others in the vicinity gave her a look of disbelief, while Twilight did as well along with a twitching eyebrow. That doesn't make sense. Twilight screeched. Trixie merely waved off her disbelief. Trixie has more important things to do, Sparkle. Now master, we must get you to learn magic. The idea of Trixie brushing her off made Twilight's brain fizzle and pop. Naruto merely looked amused as he saw Trixie grab his hand and start pulling him in the direction of the school in the distance. Trixie will prove she's the best student by bringing master into the world of magic, she said determined as she dragged the blonde along. Hey, get back here, Trixie. That doesn't make sense. Twilight shouted, following after them. Naruto could have easily stopped Trixie and put an end to this, but his curiosity was piqued. Could he do magic? TCL. Finding themselves in a library, after passing a shocked-looking librarian, they set themselves at a table. The duo of Twilight and Trixie had zoomed off to grab a couple of books for him to unleash his masterful potential, Trixie's words, not his. Twilight seemed to dislike the idea at first, and then she became enthused by the prospect of it. A clearly magical being who couldn't use magic. She'd take that challenge. Plus he was sure she wanted to fill out more of that book on guys like him some more. So as he waited, he leaned back in his chair, eyes roaming the library. His optics taking in the architecture and finding it weird. Books filling out the walls didn't really do it for him. He wondered if there were any adventure stories in here. Asp. Eyes falling back down from the walls, he came gaze to gaze with another small filly. Catching his composite eyes in those of her own dark violet ones. Staring for what could only be a rude amount of seconds, the filly slowly brought a book she held up to hide the body half of her face, trembling slightly. He stared for a completely different reason. She looked a lot like Twilight. He said out loud, causing the filly's ears to perk as she stared at him in more curiosity than discomfort. Naruto. His gaze went off to his side, finding said lavender filly coming around the corner. Following after her was Trixie, and the both of them were carrying a few books each. They turned the corner, only to find the filly who had been staring at their master. Moondancer? Twilight asked as she set her books down and approached the now awe-inspired filly. Humming over to his side, Trixie set down her 3 books and gave the pair of Twilight and Moondancer a sour look. Hey Trixie, who's the new girl? And what's her deal with Twilight? The azure unicorn simply crossed her arms. HMPH. That would be Moondancer, and she seems to be inspired by Sparkle. Trixie would wonder what her deal is, but Trixie is sure that even Master can't see where the weirdness really starts. And she wouldn't be wrong, Naruto could see exactly what she was talking about. This was the Moondancer Katie had been talking about when she mentioned her sister. Moondancer looked almost completely like Twilight and it was freaking him out. Were it not for the long brown skirt, different colors and tan long-sleeve top, he'd be well into the idea that Twilight had learned the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Thankfully, another distinction were those eyebrows of hers. They were at least not bushy brow-sized, and he was sure she wouldn't let them get that far, even as she grew. They gave her a sort of focused look, definitely made her stares seem more intense. Seeing the two hold a small conversation, Trixie broke open a book before shoving it in his face. Now Trixie knows that Master is great, but the only high-level spell she could find in the library was about the teleportation. Since that's all there is, we'll start with this. Trixie. We agreed to start with levitation. And there was Twilight to the rescue because the blonde wasn't sure what Trixie expected of him. The FFT, Trixie only said that so she could get you off her back. Now Master, we must get you working on this spell so we can move away from Sparkle at the smallest chance. Announcing her plan out loud probably wasn't a smart idea, Naruto was sure. That's why you wanted the spell. The lavender unicorn filly exclaimed before the two of them descended into another argument. Looking this over as the usual, he was surprised to find that he was one of two watching the duo. Turning to see Moondancer watching them as well, she caught him looking at her and she did her best to look as small as possible. He simply smiled at her and made a come hither motion. She caught this and trembled slightly. He could only give her the most welcoming smile he could and slowly but surely she shuffled over. Taking a seat in the chair opposite him, she set her own book on the table and just looked down at it. So his words startled her, but she looked up in uncertainty. Hands gripping the bottom of the seat slightly. You how do you know Twilight? Sir, she inquired. He simply grinned at her, causing her to retract slightly from his sharp teeth before she moved slightly just to look at his fangs. Oh, well that's because I live with her family and so I kind of help keep an eye out for her. Right now, we were trying to find out if I could do magic, but well, he gestured to the two fools who were doing their best to outshout one another, causing the little yellow filly to giggle slightly. SHHHHH. Came a shushing form the librarian as she rounded the corner, causing the two girls to flinch before uttering their apologies. Turning her eyes to him and Moondancer's directions, her eyes widened as she saw her younger sister next to the bug teen. Moondancer gave her sister a small wave as the librarian stared at the leaning back blonde. She narrowed her eyes at him, causing him to raise an eyebrow before she pointed to his foot. Said foot was listing dangerously close to the edge of the table from his lean-back position, and he quickly set himself back down. He sheepishly chuckled as she nodded her head and went back to the front, making sure to catch his sight one more time before going back. "Now if you two are done making the librarian angry," he spoke up as the two hung their heads in shame. Twilight's was especially low. He took up a book and well, the first thing he came across was words upon words. His eyes screeched to a halt over the blocky text and set the book down. Okay, so maybe this wasn't going to be so easy. Seeing his expression they asked what was wrong. Well, Twilight did, since apparently this was one of the books she had picked. Well, it's all wordy. Like I feel myself getting sleepy just by looking at it. Twilight looked like someone had just killed her puppy. That's the theory behind the application of levitation series. That's one of the most basics of books we can start with. She managed to scream quietly, only for Trixie to scoff. Leave it to Sparkle to drop nothing but words in your lap. Trixie's choices are obviously far better choices for Master's tastes. The blue unicorn of the group said, causing the blonde to pick up a book from the other stack of books. Opening that one, he was frowning once more. It was easier to understand, make no mistake. There were pictures in this one, at the least, but the spells themselves. Looking at the title on the cover, he wasn't surprised about what he was going to find. Gravity and You. The unicorn's realm of spatial magic. He sighed once more before putting the book down. Trixie, this stuff is too much. Some of these mid-level spells seem like they need me to know like a million other things before I can get to even half of it, he said, causing her to deflate. Neither of the three noticed that Moondancer had gone off and was coming back with a small book held to her chest. Two deflated fillies, and he wasn't sure if this was a good idea anymore. Right as he was about to suggest that they leave, he felt a couple of taps against his shoulder. Turning, he found Moondancer offering him a book with a small smile. Taking the book from her, he read over the title. Baby Steps to Magic. Your Unicorn Filly and You. Looking back to the book, he opened it up and skimmed the text before he smiled. Yeah, this would do it. Unconsciously setting a hand down on Moondancer's head, causing her to squeak and catching the attention of the others. Seeing a smiling Naruto holding up a book and a flushing Twilight doppelganger. I think this is what we might have been looking for, he said confidently. TCL. They had watched the blonde read over the first few pages before he tried to put into application that he read. From what he understood, unicorns channeled it through their horns and melded their internal magic with the one that existed outside their bodies. It allowed them to alter reality as they did because they were like literal buttons to a reality computer. Alicorns were like having a higher level ninja having access to the jutsu parts of a ninja library. What he was currently doing was trying to find that magic in himself and bring it out. This would create an aura representing his magic coming out. Focusing on that train of thought, he closed his eyes and tried to search for that inner well of magic energy. Feeling the grass underneath his crossed legs and the tree at his back, he was definitely pleased with the decision to move the session outside. The kids were over on a blanket that the blonde saw Twilight get from one of guards. He made sure to salute them on their way out, and here they were. They were going over that spell from before while he did his thing. Focusing back on himself again, he allowed his mind to travel his body as he seeked and searched for that magic well. The book had stated that magic should be unique to its user, at least ones with cutie marks. Once the magical tattoo had been attained, the feeling changed, but by that point most had a good grasp of it already. The blonde was hoping that the feeling of magic would remain as that of a mental spark, as the girls had been talking about. Sitting and focusing, he traced the chakra paths in his body. The streams flowing through the Tenketsu and gates was a familiar notion to him. He couldn't help but focus on each singular stream and follow its path before he found one that crossed over something weird. Following this trend were several other streams, and by that point he might have found that magic of his. Touching his mind to it, the moment he touched it, he was met with a minor pull. His horns began to glow a slight yellow as he pulled more and more on that pull. Opening his eyes, he could catch sight of the slight illumination on his head. The glow stayed for a moment and he wasn't surprised to see it fade after he lost the connection. Okay, so I do have it, he said to himself as he saw the kids each slowly levitating a small flower in front of themselves. Slowly, the flowers were changing themselves in shape. The glows of each of their auras covering the flowers, before in a blip, they each changed them. As he sat there enjoying the breeze, he heard the sound of something or more some pony coming up behind him. Each of the girls were too involved in their own work to notice as a tall, white pony entered the garden area of the school. Taller than even he by a foot, large wings bigger than any Pegasus he'd known seen up to this point, and a horn longer than any unicorn's. An alicorn. Not just any either, not that there were many to begin with, but Princess Celestia herself. The long flowing white toga dress she wore had slight gold-colored accents, her forearms adorned in long fingerless glove sleeves. Around her neck she held a necklace with a purple jewel encrusted on the largest portion, and on her hooves were golden hoof casings. Flowing tail and hair, of soft teal, purple, green and pink colors. There were two sun symbols on the hips of her dress, and he could see one on her hip of the slit of the dress, allowing the leg to be seen. Last was the signs of her rule, both her crown and the scepter she held in her hands. Humming to stand just in the shade of his tree, she stared out at the fillies with an impassive gaze. Her hair flowing in that non-existent wind of hers that never let up. He acknowledged her existence with a nod of his head as he joined her in their watching of the fillies finally becoming aware of the world around them. He could remember when he'd first met the princess. It was almost amazing how different she was from the princesses he knew. Especially so when she was more a cage than any princess. TCL. Month and a half ago. The blonde knelt down next to Morse code and sail wind as the trio of him and the captains heard the guards around them stand in attention. Presenting Her Majesty, Princess Celestia. It was as the blonde heard that he could have sworn that his senses went haywire. Becoming a sage had done tons for him as ninja. Besides that which he garnered from the toads, he'd also become far more attuned to the feeling of the energies around him. So when the world around him felt like heat and the like, well, he could be forgiven for gasping slightly from his knelt position. This power he felt far engulfed everything he'd felt up to this point. It was far stronger than the large Crepolian from before and was more comparable to something like the Bijou. His eyes went wide as he finally heard the sound of hooves on ceramic tiles. Hearing a cushion slightly deflate, he and the captains allowed their heads to rise and he gazed upon the sight of the most power creature he'd seen since coming here. The winged unicorn that sat in the large throne cut an imposing figure. Larger attributes than any of the races he'd seen up to this point made her figure stand above all the rest as a singular being. A mix of three who ruled them all. Celestia let her gaze full over those who knelt to her as she traveled the steps. Her eyes roamed her court, the court that she'd held for over 1,000 years. Her purpler eyes landing on the three kneeling ponies that were at the base of the throne's carpeting. Setting herself up on her cushioned throne, she couldn't help but find the feeling from the center pony to feel different. It was strong. Truly strong. The energy she could feel was vibrant, lively and soothing all the same. A river that flowed silently, but with great strength. Focusing in on the center pony of the three in front of her, she watched as they all rose to meet her gaze. Her eyes slowly widened as they met the visage of what was not a pony, but a race she was familiar with. Changelings. She didn't allow her countenance to fall, her expression staying neutral as she watched the proceedings. She heard as they conversed with her advisor. The two captains doing most of the speaking as the changeling merely looked up at her. The spiky mop of hair he held on his head frizzing at the tips as he kept focus on her. Her own mind coming to a halt as she realized just why he did. He could sense. He could feel that which most could not, and that meant many things. If he were of ill intent, none of which were good. Many didn't understand that as an alicorn, her magic grew in spades. From when she was first born to now. She learned, she ached, and she triumphed over many trials to become as powerful as she was. For not just herself, not just her foolish pride in her youth, but for her family, for Luna. For her ponies, when she and Luna had become their rulers. Yet, he could feel her. He could grasp how strong she was, not fully, but he had a clue. And that was dangerous. Princess Celestia. Hearing the voice of the captain, Morse code, was it? She turned her attention to him and his fellow officer. Speak, Morse. Why have you come to my chambers? Why come with another of your own, and a changeling? Her question she expected was to bring up many topics. He might have been a deserter of a clan. One of the 4 hives she knew of. Perhaps he was a dignitary. Slim, almost zero, but possible. She wasn't prepared for the first words to come out the changeling's mouth. That's what I am. He spoke with a voice of uncertainty that caused her eyes to widen slightly. Young. Almost too young, but strong. She paid more attention as the teen's small outburst got him cuffed one. The bug life form muttering small curses as he rubbed the back of his head before looking down at his hand. She needed answers. You see, Your Majesty, and he spoke a story. A story of a lost changeling with no idea of where or what he was. Of words of a different language and even tales of strength that, were he not in front of her, she might be hard-pressed to believe. Once he was finished, all those in the courtroom stayed silent. The guards who stayed behind to watch the princess could only find the tale to be hockey. To believe that one such being, especially with how young he was utterly. I believe you. And the guards and others nearly snapped their necks in accordance to her words. Celestia could only look on with a small smile as she stared down at the royal guard captains. Turning her attention to the blonde male in the middle, she sent him a look. Would all who are in the chambers please leave? I wished to have a talk with our changeling guest. Most those in the room at that moment were shocked and rightly unwilling to leave their royalty in the hands of an unknown. She allowed her gaze to roam the room, encompassing all her ponies in her smile. Please, do as I say. I'm well and fully capable of contacting you should anything happen. I only wish for you to trust me, as I trust your ability to protect me. Her words were like a caressing kindness. Now please, leave. And so they did. She watched as her ponies left. Each one passing a glance at the lone changeling in the room as they passed him. Suspicion. Spite. Regret. Naruto allowed them all to pass over him. They meant nothing to him. Just like before, just like the words of the villagers in the past. Once the room's doors closed behind him, the two were all alone. He simply stared at her as that heat engulfed the room. The intensity of this feeling was not lost on him. He simply stood as he was, not caving in the slightest. He would not cower from her. Whether he stayed or went after this, he would not be cowed by anybody. Naruto Uzumaki did not get intimidated by anyone. She merely let her gaze fall on him as she allowed her magic to flow outward. Not exerting it on him, but allowing her tightly knit control to loosen her hold on it. She merely watched his reaction and bar some more frizzing of his hair, he wasn't moved. She allowed her internal energy to flow outward some more before reining it back in. She simply let out a small sigh before coming down the steps of her throne. Naruto decidedly missed the warmth as she pulled back her influence over the area. It felt kind of chilly now. Once she stood in front of him, she simply stared him in the eyes before speaking. They speak highly of you. Tales of your strength is something I heard on the way here when I passed the junior officers, but seeing you here in the flesh I'm assured that those tales are true. Yet, I wish to know, he tilted his head at her, what do you truly think? What do I truly think? She nodded at him, her mouth staying a thin line. I cannot say that I've ever been in the presence of another like yourself and not been uncomfortable. Sombra, Discord, Tirek, Groger. Another like me? He asked and she nodded. Ones who are strong. Those that could be items of legends. She said. Ones who are within my realm of power. His eyes widened as she waved her hand at his form. Tell me, do you feel it? Do you feel the strength I possess? He stood tall but closed his eyes and nodded. She closed her own eyes and simply stayed silent. You ask me what I truly think and I think that you don't trust me and you're completely right to do so. She stayed silent. You've heard my story, so yeah, I don't have much more to add on to that. It's all in your hands whether you trust me or not. He said simply. Several moments passed before she opened her eyes. Expression still tight-lipped, she asked her last question. What is it you seek here? He chuckled. I'm honestly not sure. I guess I just want to find my place again. He responded. She took a slightly deep breath before releasing it all the same. She blinked once before bowing to him slightly. I would like to thank you. For protecting my little ponies. There are many that would be lost without them and I'd feel no small amount of grief should they never return home. So on behalf of Canterlot and all those in Equestria, I thank you. She finished with a smile as he blushed, a light teal coming to both his cheeks. No problem. Those who abandon the rules are trash, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash. That's something my older teacher once taught me and I carry that with me to this day and onward. She smiled at this. Your teacher sounds like a wise one. He smiled at her. Not really, he's just a massive weirdo. She tilted her head before shaking it in amusement. TCL. Present. She smiled as the fillies finally took notice of her. Their eyes widening in surprise, the floating rocks they now held shooting off in random directions. Like cabbages. Hello my little ponies. How are you this sunny day? She asked cordially, even as the girls ran over and bowed to her. Princess. Your Majesty. Princess Celestia. Their calls were apologetic. As if the princess would take some offense that they were too busy to notice her. The ponies really loved the princess, Naruto couldn't help but observe. Seeing them all converse, he went back to reaching for that magic of his again. He found that well, touched it, and had the mental spark. Light tugs later, and his horns were glowing. He looked up at the 2 extra extensions on his head and couldn't help but notice. Did they get longer, or was that him? Pushing the thought to the back of his mind, he thought about this magical energy now coursing through him. It felt light, airy, and thin, but it had a sort of connectedness that he couldn't really put a word to. So as he was thinking about this, he allowed it to start to move throughout his body. The energy circulating to each of his limbs as he allowed it to. He assumed his meditative stance and went stock still. Twilight could only stare at her brother's blonde friend as began to be encompassed by the magical energy. She wasn't the only one either, as Trixie and Moondancer were paying attention as well. Seeing the blonde's unmoving form become engulfed by his own magical aura was almost hypnotic. The yellow glow surrounding him was in an almost flaming spherical shape as the energy moved. For someone not used to magic, he was adapting to it pretty well. Maybe she could write this down in the book. Celestia merely looked on as her mind followed the blonde's magical output. She couldn't help but notice that the energy he was currently outputting was unlike what she felt from him before. She could feel this magical energy and it wasn't close to how she expected the blonde to be. At the same time, she could also still feel that powerful presence within him. This magical energy was possible to become more than it was, but it wasn't what made him. A new development came to her eyes as the yellow energy began to be intersected by vibrant blue. The energy swirling around one another in that sphere shape before the orb got larger. The sphere passing over the tree and coming to pass over them all. Peace, tranquility and determination. The feeling that washed over her was soothing. As if the world itself began to welcome her more into its grasp than she normally could. Eyes roaming down to the children, she was not surprised to find them all basking in this glow. They opened their eyes and she withheld a gasp as their eyes glowed the colors of their own auras. Wind, illusion, capacity, gravitation. She looked up and only then noticed her own horn had begun to glow involuntarily. Her mind being open to the flowing magics and energies that surrounded them. It was a connectedness she was just barely familiar with. Her eyes went back to the changeling and she noticed that yellow lines began to flow up the side of his face. As they encroached, she felt this aura grow stronger, more intense. Yet, it wasn't suffocating. Right as the lines were about to finish, he stopped and the feeling left the area, dying as the aura faded itself. Naruto couldn't help but to lose himself in those comforting energies. His idea of seeing how well his chakra would mix with the magic went far better than he was expecting. Feeling all those things as he did was overwhelming. Then he noticed that unconsciously he was pulling in the natural energies as well and he cut it short because he wasn't sure what could possibly happen should that come into the mix. His hair had finally rested back from its floating state before he opened his eyes. His mind coming back to the waking world, he took notice of the fact that there was no conversing coming from the side of him. Turning his eyes to the side, he found that the four females were looking at him with various expressions. Celestia seemed slightly conflicted. Her hand had come to her horn in narrow-eyed confusion. Mundancer seemed to let out a small whine as she held her hands to her horn. Trixie was grinning from ear to ear as if she had just won the greatest deal in her life. Twilight though, her eyes looked to him in wonder. As if he was a grand puzzle or some ancient book with the greatest of secrets within it. After those few moments of silence, he soon found his face full of blue and lavender. "Master, that was amazing, I've never seen that happen before, how did you do that?" He was hit by the shouts of the duo of his Philly students as they got far too close for his own taste. Pushing them back gently, he made sure to keep a hand on each of their heads, just in case. "Calm down, I have no idea what you're even talking about," he said, which caused Twilight's eyes to widen, as did Trixie's grin. "I knew Master was amazing. Trixie will be the greatest." Her enthusiasm wasn't shared by Twilight, who simply looked at him with the most curious of expressions. He eyed them for a second before he found Mundancer coming over to him with her hand scrunching up the hem of her upper article of clothing. Celestia only watched on as the other unicorn fully explained to the blonde what had transpired. All the while, she held her gaze onto him and her mind was trying to sort out the one last thing she felt when he cut off contact. A void. Something that was empty. Something that was once filled. Her mind came back from the sliver of memory, taking in the scene of Twilight and co. Trying to get the blonde to show them how he did what he did. The indeed was more than she had been expecting. TCL. 2 weeks later. He couldn't help but stare at himself in the mirror as he brought his hands up to the pair of horns at the top of his forehead. He couldn't help but notice something off about the extensions to his cranium. Seriously, are these things getting bigger? He asked himself as he tapped the bony protrusions. They seemed to be at least an inch longer than they had been originally. Maybe half of what Shining's own horn size was if taken separately. Looking at them for a little bit longer, he simply shrugged before looking down to his exoskeleton-like body. Taking himself in as he'd done so many times before, he looked at his upper portions in curiosity. His bottoms covered by the red shorts he currently wore. He brought a hand down to his stomach and focused a little chakra before finding the seal-like tattoo was still in place. It kind of looked like chalk on his stomach. On each of his limbs were those weights from some time ago when he was training with Shining for these trials. Well, it was more for Shining than Naruto. The blonde wore them just to try and even it out for the brunette unicorn. His body was another thing. It was kind of bulky in the sense that he could feel the carapace was more broad around his form. The joints were kind of exposed out of the shell where knees and the like were. Last but not least, he couldn't help but truly wonder how tough his exoskeleton was. I have to wonder what this is really still here for. "The Kyuubi's not here anymore buddy, you can get away now," he muttered to the Celestia, as if it could hear him. No response, but he wasn't surprised. Sighing, he went back to putting on the red sweat jacket. Just as he was zipping it up, that the door to the bathroom stalls opened up by none other than Shining Armor. Currently the Unicorn Junior officer was in a set of sweatpants and jacket just like the blonde himself, but his set was that of gold and purple. "Naruto. Good to see you're ready. The trials are about to start. All you have to do is make a good impression and you're in, though I'd be more surprised if you didn't make it in," the eldest of three said as he kept the door open to the blonde as they walked out the bathroom stall house. Coming out to the view outside, he took in the field as well as the other spaces of equipment going on in the center. On the sides of the fields, there were large crowds cheering on the recruits down below. Flags and shouts were made to those in the field, both in purple and red. The blonde could see Shining's family, Trixie and that elder pony from before in Cadence. Said Alicorn was currently waving at the duo of them, causing Shining to go bright red as they waved back. "This is the day you join me in the Royal Guard Naruto, look sharp," he said with a easily reciprocated grin. The blonde was looking forward to this as he and Shining walked towards the other sets of ponies in bright red wear. Midway Shining went off to join another group bearing the same colors as he was, waving the blonde to his own group. Quickly making his way to the other reds, he simply ignored the small berth they gave him and focused on the pony giving out instructions. "Attention all recruits. I welcome you to the much anticipated recruit day. Today you will be seated into to find out whether you got the stuff to be a royal guard," came the nondescript pony captain. Adorned in his own set of gray sweats, he focused on letting groups off into different directions. In a group of his own, the blonde found them being led onto the track field. Waiting for them was a familiar-looking face of the Pegasus captain. Sailwind saw the group he'd be leading in these tryouts and couldn't help but to hide his grin when he noticed the blonde changeling in their midst. He merely had a tightly held thin-lipped expression as he went down his checkboard. "Now for your first assessment, we're going to be doing some 2-mile runs. Remember that this isn't a race and it's to test your ability to keep up with the rest of the group. You pass once we have gotten to the finish line with all those involved," he said as he set down his own board and held the whistle to his lips. The group began to stretch for a bit as they got ready. Naruto for his own part was doing some leg stretches as he got ready. Finishing off with a hoof touch, he set himself up near the back of the group. "Begin." Sail blew the whistle and they were off. The blonde couldn't help but to notice as he jogged that the group of other ponies were pulling ahead, bit by bit. Each of them seemingly trying to separate from the back of the group. Every time he kept pace, he felt like they were pushing to go faster. Come the first loop around the track, they had gone from slight jogging to a decent run. Yet, the blonde paid it no mind as he kept to the back of the group. Sail was off to the side, watching as the ponies and one changeling made their second lap and he couldn't help but frown. He already see some of them doing their best to separate from the bug blonde, a sort of group agreement. Yet he only smirked once more as the blonde kept up. Come their third lap, they were failing to lose Naruto. Come the fourth, it had turned from a controlled run to a full-out one, in which the blonde kept pace just as easily as before. All the while the recruits, sans Naruto, began to sweat at the exertion. Naruto himself could hear the crowds cheering for the recruits all around, but he focused more on the voices he cared about. "You got this Naruto. Spike. You can do it, pace yourself. Go BBBFF. Twilight. Master beat the pants off those other lesser beings. If that wasn't Trixie, he'd eat a brick. Keep time son. Naruto stay easy you're coming onto to the 6th lap. Nightlight. Shiny, do your best. Naruto I want to both you boys smiling by the end of this. Twilight Velvet." Coming onto the 6th lap, Naruto decided that he'd do one for his wayward student and pulled on ahead by going around the side of the group. Those who were originally ahead of him began taking notice of the fact and tried their best to remain ahead. Come 7th loop, he was the only one who wasn't sweating heavily. He barely had a sheen on though. Halfway into the 8, he decided to drop all the pretenses and gave them one word of advice. Pulling ahead even more so, he smirked to the group at his side. "Try not to be so obvious, K. Bye." And he pulled ahead in what could only be the largest lead. By the time the ponies were at the 3/4 of the last lap, Naruto was just passing the finish line. Hands on his hip, he let out a single breath and gave Sailwind a grin, which he returned with a smirk before the captain took a check off on the list. And so his day continued as such. TCL. The rest of the exercises continued as such. From weightlifting to push-ups, sit-ups, chin-ups and the like. Then came the obstacle course. Seeing the hanging ropes, the climbing wall, the combat crawl and finally the monkey bars near the end, Naruto was sure for any normal pony, this would seem rigorous. Yet, he was no pony. Nor was he normal by any definition of the word. The group had been dissected by that point subtly. Naruto couldn't help but notice that halfway through, he was always in the front of the groups at the start. Probably a scoring system of some kind. They were on the third to last event of the day, the obstacle course. Each of the recruits stared at the long path with obstruction. The numbers had thinned out, mostly those who couldn't keep up with the training regimen or hurt themselves during. By this point there were at most 50, but more likely 40 ponies and changeling left. Naruto merely smiled at what looked like a fun time. Those in the golds and purples had finished earlier. The junior officers coming over to enjoy the last 3 events of the coming recruits. Some had gone up to the bleachers for their families, such as Shining, who now sat next to Cadence. All eyes on them. The group could only look on as an aura fell over the obstacle course. It expanded the course in its entirety, making it long enough to fit the whole lot of the rest of those doing it. So lining up along with the rest of them, Naruto got into ready stance before the whistle sounded. He separated from the group at the first instance, coming up to the climbing wall. There were a set of ropes there meant to help those across tall piece of hardened equipment. Grabbing onto one, he seemed to lunge up it. Each of his steps being long strides as he pulled harder on the rope. Once he was near the top, he grabbed onto the ledge and flipped himself over it. Grabbing hold onto a rope or two and allowed his form to fall as the friction between his soft underpalm and the rope itself meant nothing to him. The captains watching all the recruits simply raised eyebrows, widening their eyes at the blonde bug kid clearing the obstacles with ease. Once he landed on the other side of the wall, he was already a good distance ahead. Come the combat crawl, they couldn't help but laugh as he had trouble with his horns getting caught in the net. By the time he got out of it, the others were at least over the wall. Come the rope jump, they weren't sure what to expect other than the normal swing. Well, some pony didn't give this blonde the memo because he simply jumped across the distance of 20 feet and continued on like he hadn't. The monkey bars, they weren't even surprised when he began to swing from bar to bar like the obstacle's namesake. To top it off, he flipped and stuck the landing on the finish circle. The crowd seemingly ate it up because he bowed to the applause he received. Shining couldn't help but to grin as Naruto finished first. He wasn't surprised, but most of his family, nor Cadence, had truly seen what the blonde could do. Seeing him clear this like it wasn't a problem had more than a few of them clapping near the end. He couldn't help but take notice of the fact that Cadence was giving the recruits a good look over. Seeing her expression of focus, which was adorable, he asked her what was wrong. I'm just wondering, do you think Naruto likes sporty mares? Some pony who can keep up with him? I can't help but wonder, maybe that's why none of my choices were working. Shining sweat dropped as she seriously contemplated this. Twilight only stared as Spike bounced about in his seat, cheering on his BBBB as the buggy team trounced all the competition. Trixie, for all she was worth, was cheering loudly as her grandfather just kept blinking at the display the changeling was putting on. Velvet was currently just looking on in slight worry as the blonde went through all the obstacles before sighing when he made it to the end first. She turned to her husband only to find the unicorn stallion was bouncing a bag of something jingly. Rubbing his face on the sack, he opened his eyes to catch his wife staring at him before he tried to hide it behind him with a nervous grin. TCL. The changeling stood on the raised platform, hands in his pockets as he stared at the pony across from him. Said pony was shaking slightly as she stared at the buggy teen. She, along with many others, had seen what the blonde could do. She couldn't help but lick her lips nervously as she looked down at the large bullseye on his chest. She was just supposed to hit him 3 times in the bullseye on his front or back. He was to do the same as she too wore a bullseye on her body. The captain raised a flag as their match was about to start. Ready? She set herself into the stance of forefront hoof. She was a novice practitioner, but she had enough training to maybe take him down. She'd seen him, he was a wild sort. He had speed, flexibility and strength, but she had skill. Hopefully. Go. And the flag fell. She darted forward, her form low to the ground, before she came up right in his face, aiming with a rising kick. Leaning back, he simply dodged just enough to have it barely touch his nostril. Seeing this, she flared out her wings in his face before bringing the leg back around to his midsection. So she was surprised to find herself missing as he ducked down, like some sort of frog. Humming back up, he quickly jabbed her in the solar plexus, getting a call of a point against her, his blow sending her skidding backwards. She only stopped just barely from the ring-out circle. Her eyes widened as she looked back up at him. She growled as he stayed standing with his arms in his pockets. He was mocking her as he simply stood there with a smile. She set her form back up, arms at 90 degrees to her sides, legs spread as she had her body turned away from him. She waited for a moment before she launched at him again. She set her back leg on the ground before aiming a kick straight for his center. It wouldn't score a point probably, but it would bring him closer to the ring out. A ring out was still a win without the need for 3 points. He slipped to the side as she expected, but she rotated as fast as she could, flaring out a wing to take him off guard before bringing back the leg from before to kick him backwards. He ducked the wing, and she was hoping she could catch him in the sides of his body or face. So she found herself on the floor when he grabbed her leg, pulled her close and palmed her in the back, sending her across the mat. Point. Another against her. She got back up as her eyes narrowed at her opponent, only to find him set into stance, unlike before. Legs spread into a heart and horse stance, one hand in a fist held at his right side, with the other fist extended out with the arm slightly bent. She felt her eyes widen as she set herself back up again. She didn't know what to expect. She would prepare the best she could. So it came as an even bigger surprise to her when she was sent sailing out the ring. TCL. Come the last exercise, most were simply expecting the blonde to dominate once more. Until things changed. In accordance to the will of the princess. Most snapped their heads to the podium where all the captains stood, where a certain sun goddess now stood, scepter in hand, as she whispered to one of the guards. We will have a change of event. Will Naruto Uzumaki step forward? The captain shouted as the blonde changeling brought himself to the front of the group. Running over to the podium on the other side of the field from the others and to the podium. Once there he was tossed a band bearing the princess's mark on it. After looking it over, he put it on his bicep and was told to face the other direction. Towards the trainees. He could already see where this was going, but he grinned when he saw the princess direct a hand-covered smile his way. Oh, the game is on, princess. There was a glow from her horn before the entire field was changed. The forest. A canopy of heavy foliage appeared between the blonde and the other recruits. Over by the other group of recruits, they were approached by a junior officer, handing them all sets of bands with no markings on them. Once they were on, they all heard the princess speak as her voice was projected over the area. In front of her lips was a small floating dimmed circle, just large enough for her mouth. Each time she spoke it lit up before stopping when she did. Hello my little ponies, I apologize for my barging in on this year's recruit day, but I felt that we should spice up this year's initiation of it. For the last exercise, I've set up a veritable field and it will be the top recruit against the rest. For this event we'll have our recruit, Naruto Uzumaki, face off against the rest in a battle of keep away. She snapped her fingers and the mark on Naruto's band began to glow. In response each of the trainees themselves had view of a small golden light across from them. Recruit Naruto currently holds a band with my mark on it and you all should be able to see a light emitting from the other side of the field. The light will help you determine just how far from the target you are. With the increase or decrease in distance, the light will alter itself. At 5 meters from the target, the light will stop emitting for those up close. The goal of the recruits is to find and apprehend recruit Uzumaki. Naruto's goal is to capture at the least 10 bands by the end of the 10-minute mark. Should neither side complete their objective we will call a draw, she finished before, in a flash of golden light, a screen appeared on above the field. On it was a picture of Naruto on one end, while the rest of the recruits were on the other. Underneath each picture, there was a photo of their bands. In between the two sides was a large map of the field, with dots of red showing the recruits and a gold one showing the blonde changeling. Finally above the map was a small countdown, starting at 10 seconds and going down. 0:10. Once a band has been removed, you will be expelled from the field and not allowed to re-enter. So my little ponies. 0:05. Let the games. 0:02. Begin. 0 o'clock. Most of those in the recruit section were sure of themselves. Weird looking as he was, the blonde was only one guy. Compared to the 40 they had on their side, it shouldn't have been hard to catch and subjugate him. So it was with that mindset that they ran into the forest, towards that gold light. Twilight and Trixie couldn't help but feel nervous for Naruto. That was a lot of ponies, and even for some pony like Naruto, this was a bit much. Those in the bleachers only watched as the dots from both sides entered the forest. The map expands showing only that the single gold dot was seemingly strolling into the territory, while the red ones were quickly covering ground. Naruto master. Spike was worried as well, but he believed in his BBBB and wouldn't do any less than cheer for him. Velvet was more than slightly suspicious of her son's friend's chances of winning. She made sure to look to her right as Nightlight was currently watching the map as well. His eyes narrowing as she turned back. Never catching the stallion casually handing a bag of bits to several other stallions waiting in the crowd as they all added it to a bag in between them. Cadence looked on as she saw those dots getting closer and closer to the blonde's position. The red dots had spread out around, seeming to want to pincer attack the gold dot. Turning her eye to her left to get Shining's take on this, she found him grinning as he saw her look. When asked why, he merely shook his head. His confidence in his changeling friend overshadowing the nervousness he had when he was close to the pink alicorn. "Oh, I'm just wondering how long until the first casualty," he said, only to smirk when their beep and all turned to see one of the bands of the recruits disappeared. Said recruit was expelled from the forest soon after, falling on his rump as he stared back into it. "I don't even know what happened," he shouted, much to the confusion of the crowd but to the amusement of Shining. In the next moment, there were several more beeps before several other recruits were ejected from the forest in similar fashion. Naruto couldn't help but to grin as he stood in the shade of a tree. The sounds of a passing recruit's hoofsteps all he needed to hear before he lashed out. His arm came to grab the mare's yellow arm before he pulled and tossed her over shoulder into an oncoming mulberry blue stallion earth pony. Collapsing in a heap, they didn't get a chance to get up before the blonde was above them and slipping off their bands. Their form stayed still for a moment before quickly blurring out of the forest. "How many is that?" he asked out loud before quickly clotheslining a running Pegasus and tossing him over his shoulder, idly pulling off his band as he did. The sailing, not on his own power, Pegasus didn't even touch the floor before his body blurred out of the forest. Shaking his head, the blonde merely jumped high as another set of steps made themselves known. The now visible unicorn mare walked unsteadily into the center of the forest. Her eyes went every which way as she did her best to keep an eye out for the blonde. "Oh okay. Nothing to worry about, gulp, he's one guy, ha, ha, one guy, oh no." She stopped as her ears flicked to and fro in search of a sound. His glowing head stopped a bit back, meaning that he was close to her. Somewhere around her. She felt her own heartbeat going crazy as she turned in place. Right as she was about to look more, she heard something and let out a scream as another stallion entered the clearing. His black fur and yellow hair meshed well with the backdrop of the forest. She could see his horn, meaning he was a unicorn like her. He seemed out of breath as he clutched his knees, letting out some deep breaths. "Whoa, ha, I didn't think I'd find any pony else in here. I thought I saw that guy's dot, but it disappeared on me." "You see him?" "Ha," he asked as he steadied himself, her heartbeat coming down from its frenzied state as she realized it was an ally of hers. Looking at him, she was glad to have some pony else with her. She didn't want to get caught out of nowhere, alone. Walking up to him, she greeted him with a high-five greeting and they continued on. Looking every which way as they looked to see if the dot showed up. Stopping for a moment, going back to back, she was about to say something before she heard a shout. "Alright, you bug bastard. I'm about to show you what's faux huh." A voice came from their left, causing her to scream before another recruit came barreling out of the forest. She calmed down when he took notice of them and jogged over looking left and right. "You guys seen Uzumaki? I could have sworn I saw him in this exact direction, then he disappeared. I figure he's around here somewhere." The Pegasus stallion looked every which way in search for a gold dot but found nothing, putting him on edge. "We haven't seen him either. I think he's playing us. He wants to make us panicked. We have 7 minutes left, so he might be trying to time us out," she said, causing the Pegasus to look at her before thinking himself. You might be right. Besides, now that we're all together, we can get 'em all at once," he said, causing her to nod as well. The black unicorn stallion's back was to them, so they never saw his mouth expand into a grin. He rubbed his hands together menacingly. "Hey guys, I think I just saw something." His words caused the two to snap their heads in another direction as they rushed over to him. What is it?" "Was it Uzumaki?" "Come out, you bastard." "Yeah? Where is he? What did you see?" The only female of the group screamed as she joined the Pegasus in looking for him. Neither of them were aware of when they lost their bands until they felt 2 taps on their shoulders. Turning around as one, they saw their black-furred comrade twirling their bands, causing them to look to him in shock. At that moment, before they blurred away, his form rippled an orange flame before Uzumaki appeared. Bye, he waved them off, but not before they shouted at him. "He can transform into other ponies." From there, the forest became a cacophony of noise as ponies in groups panicked. Most could not believe the sight as recruit after recruit came out of the forest. Each one muttering some intelligible words that they didn't understand. He came out of nowhere. "I was so close. There were so many mares. My leg. My eyes. He's not equine. He's in the trees." The crowd could only watch in awe as red dot after red dot disappeared one after the other. They could all see the golden dot coming towards red dots and the reds disappearing as soon as it made contact. Shining was laughing the whole way through as things progressed. The screams were the best part. They were the last group as far as they were concerned. They had been together as soon as this started and each was sure to never leave the others. "Come on, he's around here, somewhere. I can see his dot," right to the earth pony at the front of their group started but stopped as they all saw the dot disappear. Meaning? They quickly went back to back. 4 of them, as it were, they could cover all the cardinal directions. Their eyes went everywhere, their ears were set for anything, and their bodies were ready. So it came as a surprise when they heard a voice echoing from all directions. "Oh, so you're all that's left. Little ponies roaming the forest, each coming to meet their end. Once I come around the bend." After those words, they stiffened when they heard the sound of rustling from their left. They all froze as they watched that direction, prepared for anything. Seeming to just appear out of the forest like it was water, Naruto looked at the last group. It was maybe 3 mares of all 3 races, being led by a single earth pony male. He tilted his head at the group before looking up. They didn't move, awaiting the trap, but the stallion looked up to see the clock above the map, which now had the time limit, was at 45 seconds. Looking back down, the blonde smiled at them. 40 seconds left, guys. What are you going to do? Listen to the forest, you're all that's left, he stated simply, as if talking about the weather. They could all feel the sweat coming down the side of their heads as they looked at the insectoid guy. He was doing nothing but standing there, but it was as if they could see nothing but shadows. The unicorn mare of the group merely stated the obvious. "We only have 30 seconds. We have to attack now." The other mares seemed to agree with her as they all rushed him. The earth pony stallion stared in shock as he held out an arm to them. "No, wait." He tried, but it was already too late. The second the first mare crossed the distance, the forest erupted into smoke and each of them found themselves at the mercy of a blonde bug. The earth pony stallion could only stare in shock as the 3 were dealt with. Before leaving, each clone made sure to blow into the ears of each of the mares, making each one let out a shriek as they zoomed out of the forest. All that was left was him. Seeing the clock count down from 10, he simply collapsed to his knees as the blonde strolled forth. Naruto simply sat in front of him as the stallion handed over his band, not even offering up a fight. TCL. Standing in attendance with the rest of the defeated trainees, Naruto simply smiled as he could feel the glares of some of the wounded pride around him. Many were, for the most part, depressed that they had been defeated, while a few just wondered how. "I thank you all for your hard work today. You may now call yourselves members of the Royal Guard." Morse code spoke from his place at the podium as the group cheered before being let go to disperse. Naruto, for his point, was about to simply walk away to the bleachers to the others, but had been stopped by more than a few of the other recruits. Handshakes, high fives, and the like were traded. He was surprised, but perfectly fine with reciprocating. Moments later, he was far lighter than before and he had a smile on his face as he met up with his little group. "That was beyond cool. You were all like Aereo, wham, whoosh. When I come around the corner. And it was all so cool." Spike's enthused retelling was more than a little hilarious to the ninja, who ruffled his head spines. Trixie wasn't worried in the slightest. "Master is the best, a warrior." Trixie was always sure he would win. Came the boast of a certain Azure filly, he knew she was probably lying. And she was. "Wait, I thought you were chewing your fingernails and saying stuff like that's unfair to Master." "Huh. Little Beatrice." The elder-looking stallion next to Trixie spoke up, causing her cheeks to burn a bright red. "Grandfather." Trixie did no such thing. "Aw, adolescence." He was quick to high-five Shining, and they locked arms. "I knew you'd push through, didn't doubt you for a moment." The unicorn stallion grinned, as did the changeling. "Oh, sure you weren't the smallest bit worried," he said with a smirk. As a matter of fact, he was laughing the whole way through. "Naruto, that was amazing. I'm sure there's never been a pony that I know who could have done what you did today." Cadence came up with a hug to the blonde, to which he returned. "Well, I would think that Shining knows better than any pony just how good I am." He grinned, as did Shining. Twilight Velvet merely walked over and gave him a pat on the back as she congratulated him. Nightlight gave the blonde a crushing hug as he soon thereafter was rubbing his face against a large bag of jiggling items. He was taken away by ear by his wife as Twilight came forward. "How? I don't understand. There should have been no statistical way for you to have won. I don't get it." She threw waving arms at him, to which he laughed and crouched to her level. "Twilight, Twilight, Twilight. TSK, TSK, TSK." He wagged his finger at her. "I can do what I do because of one reason. I'm awesome." He pointed a thumb at himself. At night, the family and friends had a large outing at a very fancy-looking restaurant. TCL. Some months later. Passion Week. The blonde looked up from the beanbag chair in Shining's room. The comic book in hand had be folded in his lap as he turned his attention to Cadence. Cadence stood there with that flyer in her hands as Shining Armor re-entered the room. In hand, he had a box of donuts. Donut Joe's creme special. Now with bear claws and butterfly rolls. He announced to the other teens in the room. Naruto raised his hand in celebration as he flipped over the back of the chair and rolled to the stallion before coming into standing position. Cadence merely rolled her eyes at the duo before the blonde changeling presented a cream puff underneath her nose. Her mock annoyance was quickly forgotten. Indulging in the treats, the ninja perked an ear as he could hear the telltale sounds of an incoming pony or drake. Spike, get back here. I told you that I don't want any pony to see it. That sounded like Twilight. But it's better. I'm sure Naruto would love to see it. Naruto, you gotta see this. In through the door and into his stomach came the running form of Spike. The bug teen did his best to not fall over, hold onto his food and keep his food in as the drake body slammed him. Good hustle on that one. Naruto. Naruto. Shiny. Cadence. You guys gotta see. Then in came Twilight, also tackling him in the stomach, pinching the paper in Spike's hand from his grip. The blonde for his part just focused on keeping food in and not out. Spike, I told you to stop taking my things. I didn't want any pony to see this. Twilight said as she held the paper in both hands, away from the grabby drake. Never noticing Shining Armor looking over her shoulder to look at the paper. The older brother he was, Shining commented. Is that some sort of bug-eyed moose? Twilight froze before she turned to see her brother over her shoulder. Ah. She jumped before landing on her brother's bed. She glared over at him with a pout before noticing a certain flyer in the room. Picking it up, she looked it over and looked to Cadence, who was just enjoying all that was going on with a smile on her face. What's this flyer all about? Cadence, you're going to this? The pink alicorn nodded as she pointed at the paper. This show only comes once every season and I wanted Shiny and Naruto to go with me since they have the week off from training. Plus, it's in Manhattan, we can go see all the cool stuff around the actual city, she said excited, causing Twilight to frown. She never really got fashion, for the most part. Give her a good book and she was perfectly fine. Spike looked up at Naruto with a frown as well, but for different reasons. Oh, you mean you're not going to even be here? The drake whined as Naruto gave his head a good ruffle. The blonde knew just how much the drake enjoyed their time together. While the blonde couldn't give a lick about some fashion show, he wasn't adverse to seeing some of the other places in Equestria. Especially if they were in Canterlot. It was a nice place for the most part, but most of the ponies here sucked. Cadence, you think we could bring Twilight and Spike with us? He asked, looking down at the drake and getting a shocked look from Twilight herself. The pink alicorn tapped a finger to her lip as she considered it. Letting her eyes trail down to the drake currently giving her the wobbliest set of puppy dog eyes, almost made her fall to her knee and hug him right there. Oh wait, she did. Whirling the little dragon in her arms, she stopped for a moment with Spike in her grasp and pointed dramatically. Fine then. Boys and girls, pack your bags. We're going to Manhattan. Naruto could already feel like this trip was going to be changing. In a number of ways. What if Naruto was Summer in My Little Pony? End here and thanks for watching my video till the end.